Chapter 466. The 4 golden armored guards didn't even have the chance to fight back. Their vitality disappeared instantly, and they stood there like stone statues. It was only at this moment that Li Zhong's forehead was covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. He suddenly realized that this strange young man who suddenly appeared behind him was not only powerful, but also had no bad intentions. Otherwise, he wouldn't have killed the 4 golden armored guards just because they pulled out their swords. This also proved that this strange young man was temperamental and didn't like to be offended. Now that the young man's hand was on his shoulder, Li Zhong clearly realized that if his response made the young man feel uncomfortable, the young man could take his head off with a single thought. Your cultivation is outstanding in the whole Sky Martial continent. Why do you have to do such a despicable thing? Now that my life is in your hands, don't you dare to introduce yourself before you ask for my name? This is the most basic courtesy. Li Zhong thought for a while. Although he was depressed, he didn't show any sign of giving in. With the young man's cultivation, killing him was just a matter of a thought. He could even do it quietly. Now that he showed up and held him, it was obvious that he wanted to know something from him, or maybe he wanted him to tell him something. After all, he was an otaku who never went out of the Northern Region Prince's mansion. It was impossible for him to provoke such an existence. If the aristocratic family of the Northern Region had such a trump card, Lin Yuan would have died before he completely took control of the Northern Region. After thinking for a while, Li Zhong quickly confirmed the young man's identity. He was the one behind the aristocratic family's rebellion. He was the one who gave the aristocratic families confidence that they could compete with the Northern Frontier aristocratic families and the Blackwater Dragon Palace. Now the Northern Frontier aristocratic families were doomed. Even if he died, Luo Su died, and the Northern Battlefront Army and the embroidered uniform guards were all dead. As long as Lin Yuan was still in the Northern Frontier, the aristocratic family's doomsday would not change. With the young man's secret plans, if the Northern Frontier aristocratic families weren't easy to deal with and didn't investigate carefully, the Northern Frontier aristocratic families might have been subverted by him. A scheming person like that wouldn't waste his time doing useless things. Introduce myself? Forget it. I don't even remember my own name. I haven't been called by anyone for hundreds of years. You should just call me Kong Lezen. A hint of loneliness appeared in the strange young man's eyes. But in an instant, he collected his emotions and said with a smile, "That Black Jiao has repeatedly ruined our plans." He even personally planned to kill the Fire Kirin, making all our plans to control the Hengduan Mountains go down the drain. We originally planned to subvert the Northern Frontier to repay that Black Jiao. I didn't expect you juniors would ruin our plans. Eat the king's food and be loyal to the king. We'll do our best to serve His Excellency, Dragon King. Li Zhong also said with a smile, "Although I have never heard of the 4 Alliance, those who can plot against the Hengduan Mountains are definitely not existences that I can provoke. Senior, you can kill me, but it won't benefit the overall situation. Instead, it will make you an enemy of our Dragon King. I'm not afraid of death. I'm just plotting for the sake of the Dragon King, for myself, and for Senior. Senior, please put away your threats and directly tell me why you came to see me." Plotting for me? A fierce look flashed in Kong Lezen's eyes. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Do you think that Dragon King of your family wants to fight to the death or make peace with me after I've already done so much?" This sentence was a difficult question. After all, ever since Lin Yuan came into the world, he had always shown the face of a warmonger. Everyone knew that this Black Jiao was someone who was unwilling to suffer losses and would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Judging from Kong Lezen's actions of secretly plotting to subvert the Northern Frontier, the enmity between him and Lin Yuan could be considered to be irreconcilable. Although Senior is secretly plotting this matter, since it hasn't been completed, it can't be mentioned in the same breath. Li Zhong straightened his clothes and removed Kong Lezen's hand from his shoulder. He turned to look at Kong Lezen and said, "So what if the world says that the Dragon King is a killing star that has descended to the mortal world? There are too many things in the mortal world. If one only speculates about everything based on hearsay, wouldn't that be the actions of a fool? If the Dragon King is really a warmongering and bloodthirsty person, then today's Northern Frontier should be a purgatory on Earth, not a paradise on Earth." Lin Yuan's actions were too many, so many that people couldn't clearly see what kind of existence he was. In the Hengduan Mountains, Lin Yuan was a different kind of demon beast. His warmongering was far greater than the majority of demon beasts, but his actions were slick and sly. He could beat the Green Marsh clan into submission, and he could also bribe the majority of demon kings to speak for him. He even opened the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to gain a lot of benefits for himself. At the same time, he also allowed all the humans and demon beasts involved in this matter to achieve a win-win situation. To the people of the northern frontier, Lin Yuan was more like a benevolent lord. He established new laws, but he wasn't harsh. Small mistakes were punished, big mistakes were punished, but no one could say that Lin Yuan's enforcement of the law was unclear, improper, and not strict. In addition, he took the land of the northern frontier as his country, reduced the taxes of the people, and rented these fertile lands for the people to cultivate at an extremely low price. In the northern frontier prince's mansion, Lin Yuan was like an omnipresent god. It was as if everyone's thoughts were within Lin Yuan's expectations. How the various departments should cooperate, who would be responsible if something went wrong, everything was well organized by Lin Yuan. For those who had disloyal thoughts, even if they didn't reveal the slightest abnormality on their faces, they would still be beaten by Lin Yuan, making them not dare to challenge his authority. He also made use of the differences between the various factions to control them, making them hostile and divided, but at the same time, they could wholeheartedly work for the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. In the Xinwu dynasty, Lin Yuan was like an ambitious and ruthless person. Internally, he cleaned up the aristocratic families and sects, established new laws, established academies, and carried out many reforms. Externally, he set up a new army and strictly trained them. No one knew how many cards Lin Yuan held in his hands and how big his appetite was. However, Lin Yuan's ambition to annex the Xinwu dynasty was also clear as day. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent out troops to conquer the northern rebel army's territory before the Xinwu dynasty's decree arrived. There were too many masks, making it difficult for people to see what kind of existence Lin Yuan was. Even someone as intelligent as Li Zhong could only say that Lin Yuan was an ambitious and ruthless person who only cared about results. He didn't care about what methods you used to do things, as long as you could achieve the results he wanted. In Lin Yuan's eyes, whatever hatred and strife were not worth mentioning. As long as he could achieve his goal, even if he had to drink and chat merrily with his enemies, it wouldn't be a problem. At least in Li Zhong's eyes, this was Lin Yuan's way of thinking. No one could tell what the real Lin Yuan was like. Chapter 467. It was precisely for these reasons that Li Zhong revered Lin Yuan, even more than Kong Lezhen, who could take his head with a raise of his hand. Although accompanying a king was like accompanying a tiger, only an extremely complicated and ambitious person like Lin Yuan could make countless talents seek refuge with him. After all, working with a king who could understand them and fight with them with wisdom and courage was the greatest pleasure for them, who stood at the top of the human pyramid. This had always been the case since ancient times. Only the founding emperors would gather around those mediocre lords who only knew how to protect their country. Even though their abilities were similar, their mentality was completely different. After gaining power, they would naturally treat the country differently from the people. Oh, everyone says that you, Li Zhong, are extremely intelligent. I would like to hear what you have to teach me. Kong Lezhen seemed to be suddenly interested as he looked at Li Zhong with a burning gaze. It was unknown whether he was serious or joking. At this moment, Kong Lezhen no longer had the killing intent from before, which made Li Zhong more and more certain that this person was temperamental. Although I have not heard of the 4 allied groups that Senior mentioned, with Senior's cultivation and temperament, they must be one of the top forces. Just this point alone, Senior and my Dragon King have a lot to talk about. There is no need to see each other as enemies. Previously, when Senior mentioned the Fire Kirin and the Hengduan Mountains, I speculated that Senior or the force behind Senior needs the power of the Hengduan Mountains, or something in the Hengduan Mountains. To achieve this, in addition to directly controlling the Hengduan Mountains, you can also indirectly control the Hengduan Mountains. Although my Dragon King is not a human, since he was in power in the northern frontier, he could make the human and demon races live in peace. Whether it was the Hengduan Mountains or the 7 dynasties, they all recognized the Dragon King's ruling power in the northern frontier. Although on the human side, the Dragon King had a bad reputation, in the Hengduan Mountains, the Dragon King was an existence that opened up new territory. Now that the Beast Lord Kirin was old, it was time for the Beast King to change positions. If Senior is willing to help my Dragon King ascend to the position of the Beast Master, with the existence of the incense burning in the incense, would the Dragon King be able to disgrace Senior in return for what Senior wants? Although I did not personally witness the Fire Kirin's chaos in the Hungduan Mountains, every time I heard about it, my heart palpitated. The Fire Kirin was originally not favored by the Hungduan Mountains' demon beasts. Even if it forcefully fought for the position of Beast Lord, it would inevitably fail. After all, other than the Beast Lord, there were 3 other great beast kings in the Hungduan Mountains, as well as a group of desolate demon realm beast kings eyeing it covetously. I thought that the Fire Kirin's failure was inevitable. It was the first time, and it would be the same for the next few times. If Senior still wants to control the Hungduan Mountains, it would be better to turn direct to indirect. Li Zhong spoke while wiping the cold sweat on his forehead. Although his fear of Kong Lezin had gradually faded, when it came to such a big matter, a scheming person like Kong Lezin would definitely think about it several times. In addition, this person was temperamental. If he felt that Li Zhong was scheming against him, even the gods wouldn't be able to save him. Although he was afraid, Li Zhong still expressed his opinion. Turn direct to indirect? Interesting. Kong Lezin stretched out his hand and pointed at Li Zhong twice, and laughed. It seems that the rumors are true. You do have some skills. But the problem is that this seat and the 4 united group are unable to intervene in the matters of the Hungduan Mountains. Otherwise, the Fire Kirin would not have failed. After all, that would have broken the unspoken rules of the Sky Martial Continent. Otherwise, when this seat had just arrived at the northern frontier, your Dragon King would have already died. At this point, Kong Lezin pondered for a moment before gently shaking his head with a smile. Furthermore, if that happens, the demonic beasts and humans will start a war. Although I'm not afraid of infamy, I can't do something that will shake the foundation of the Sky Martial Continent. At this moment, Kong Lezin no longer cared about Li Zhong pushing his hand off his shoulder. After all, he came to the northern frontier this time for vacation, and also because of the death of the Fire Kirin, causing the 4 united group to completely lose the hope of controlling the Hungduan Mountains. But if he could indirectly control the Hungduan Mountains through Lin Yuan, not only would the 4 united group not have any objections, but they would also fully support Lin Yuan. After all, this Dragon King, who oversaw the northern frontier, was much stronger than those fellows in the Hungduan Mountains who were loyal to the monster beast imperial court. At least, he would not refuse any beneficial cooperation. As long as the 4 united group could afford the price and shoulder the responsibility, after Lin Yuan became the Beast Master, it was not impossible for him to directly dispatch the monster beasts of the Hungduan Mountains to work for the 4 united group. That's fine. Li Zhong waved his hand and said in a deep voice, Senior can't intervene in the affairs of the monster beasts, but can't you intervene in the affairs of humans? Now, although my family's Dragon King is not the most powerful candidate for the position of Beast Master, the great merit of expanding the territory has fallen on him. Those great beast kings naturally won't ignore the Dragon King. Otherwise, once Lord Dragon King leads the northern frontier to leave the Hungduan Mountains, even if the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce can't continue, they will be reduced to the situation of being trampled on by others. As the saying goes, it's easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. They are already used to the existence of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce that can provide them with benefits and convenience, so they will never give it up so easily. Kong Lezin pondered for a moment, and his mind quickly turned. The existence of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was not as simple as just earning benefits for Lin Yuan. Whether it was Shenwu Kingdom or the Hungduan Mountains, in fact, they were already inseparable from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Those who said that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was not good were mostly from aristocratic families and nobles. Because Lin Yuan showed his cards, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce could give benefits, but would not give the control to anyone. Therefore, they said that the grapes were sour because they couldn't eat them. In fact, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's move was called moistening things silently. Whether it was the Shenwu dynasty or the Hungduan Mountains before making a move against Lin Yuan, they would have to consider how difficult their lives would be without the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. This move not only increased Lin Yuan's influence, but more importantly, as long as Lin Yuan delivered benefits on time, no one would dare to easily provoke him. When they fell out, it meant that Lin Yuan was completely prepared to wrestle with anyone. Amazing. Apart from this, Kong Lezin could not think of any other adjectives that could be used to evaluate Lin Yuan's move. What this student means is that the Dragon King now controls the northern frontier and has considerable influence in the Hungduan Mountains. If Senior can work from this aspect and give the Dragon King more convenience, the Dragon King will have a greater chance of competing for the position of the Beast Master. He will also remember Senior's good deeds. The corners of Li Zhong's mouth rose slightly, and his forehead finally stopped sweating. This was because he could see that Kong Lezin was thinking. And thinking meant that he was moved. Chapter 468. In fact, at this moment, Kong Lezin's heart was indeed greatly moved. The Hengduan mountain range had always been outside the Seven Empires, especially in the past 1,000 years. The strongest person in the Hengduan mountain range was only the Beast Lord Kirin, who had walked a little further in the desolate demon realm. However, so what if the current Beast Lord Kirin was unfathomable in the eyes of the desolate demon realm? What it lacked from the next realm was not cultivation or aptitude, but a door that it could not enter without guidance. This was also the reason why the Beast Lord Kirin had been famous for so many years but had never been chosen by the top bosses above. This was because no matter how powerful the Beast Lord Kirin and Lei Qiusheng were, they were only at the peak of the mortal world. They were still a door that they could not cross on their own to become a true cultivator. Although the top forces and these mortal world forces were partners, those bosses did not take these existences who controlled the power of the mortal world seriously. Only Lin Yuan could be considered an accident. This was because when Lin Yuan was born, he had created the image of himself as the reincarnation of an ancient mighty figure. Even the casually fabricated demon court did exist. Moreover, the demon court at its peak was an existence that these top forces had to look up to. Coupled with the various miracles that Lin Yuan had created, the identity of the reincarnation of a mighty figure of the demon court was firmly fastened on Lin Yuan. It was laughable to say that he was the only one who did not believe that Lin Yuan was the reincarnation of a mighty figure of the demon court. It was also because of the existence of these identities that no one had ever doubted that Lin Yuan could become an existence at the same level as the leaders of the top forces in the future. It was not impossible for him to even recreate the demon court. Logically speaking, the guardians of the Heaven's Gate, who were mostly humans, should not have allowed an existence like Lin Yuan to grow. However, the enemy outside the Heaven's Gate was too powerful. It was so powerful that the top experts of this world could only hide behind the Heaven's Gate day and night and struggle at death's door. In accordance with the principle of uniting all forces, although these bosses would not promote Lin Yuan without principles, they would definitely not suppress Lin Yuan for their own selfish interests. After all, sharing the fruits was the privilege of the winner, and the loser could not even eat the leftovers. No one would attack a comrade who could grow. Even if they wanted to attack, it would be after the threat outside the Heaven's Gate was eradicated. This was the reason why the top forces were competing to show goodwill to Lin Yuan. What do you mean? Kong Lezin thought for a moment, he closed his eyes and sneered. It seems that all of us have underestimated the ambition of this Black Jiao. Senior, what do you mean? Li Zhong's expression changed several times, and he carefully probed. From the initial shock and hesitation to the current joy, Li Zhong did not even pretend on the surface. He was not worried that Kong Lezin would take the opportunity to raise his conditions, because only with conditions could he bargain. If Kong Lezin directly killed him, or turned around and left without saying a word, it meant that not only would they not be able to obtain any help, they would even have to add another powerful enemy. Kong Lezin pondered for a moment, then gently shook his head, and said in a deep voice, "It seems that you don't know much about the Black Jiao. What I can tell you is that the vice president of the Demon Emperor Association, Ding Zai, came from the Upper Deer Association, which is a force not inferior to our four united group. The Black Jiao should already know his identity, so your plan is already behind the Black Jiao." This. Li Zhong looked at Kong Lezin blankly. Lin Yuan knew about all the movements in the northern frontier, but as the king of the northern frontier, he was also within the scope of supervision. No one dared to challenge Lin Yuan's authority, so Lin Yuan would either not do anything, or if he wanted to do something, he would have already prepared the overall plan. When it was time to take action, he would tell them part of the plan, and then adjust according to the direction of the matter. Li Zhong could guess Lin Yuan's ambition. This was because apart from Lin Yuan, Li Zhong was the clearest about the northern frontier's current situation. The seemingly great momentum of the northern frontier was actually unable to make ends meet. This was because any market was saturated. Even if Lin Yuan could extract all the Feis in the Hengduan mountain range, it would be useless. This was because the 7 dynasties' sects, clans, and itinerant cultivators did not have enough purchasing power. The current Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce could barely maintain its operations, but it was definitely impossible to take out a large amount of money and food to invest in the development of the northern frontier. In such a difficult situation, one could choose to keep the peace and turn a blind eye to all the hidden dangers around them. After accumulating enough money and food to support the development of the northern frontier, they would settle the score with these people once and for all. However, this was the way to preserve one's achievements. It wasn't suitable for Lin Yuan, who was eager to forge ahead, and it wasn't suitable for the northern frontier, which was crying piteously for food. This was because no one knew how long the Xinwu dynasty's chaos would last. Once the internal strife was quelled and the external enemies retreated, even if Lin Yuan could still maintain his current status and authority, those clans and sects would definitely do their best to kill the northern frontier's reform before it was even born. Therefore, Lin Yuan couldn't wait any longer. He had to complete the reform of the entire northern frontier as soon as possible and protect his foundation. Only then would he be able to make all those scheming in the dark helpless. Therefore, Lin Yuan's only choice was to expand his territory. Of course, the territory wasn't the most important because all the benefits brought by the territory were long-term and continuous. Therefore, when Lin Yuan dispatched the southern expedition, the butcher's knife was actually aimed at those clans and sects in the north. The wealth that these people had accumulated over the years was rather considerable. If he wanted to quickly complete the reform of the northern frontier and spread it to the entire north and even the Xinwu dynasty, Lin Yuan could only kill the goose that laid the golden eggs and devour the accumulated foundation of these factions. SSS. Li Zhong suddenly sucked in a cold breath. Kong Lezin looked at Li Zhong with great interest and said with a smile, "The situation of the northern frontier can be hidden from many people, but those who really stand at the top will not be blinded by a single leaf. For example, although the northern frontier isn't full of brilliant generals, there are still many capable generals. It chose to send Li Zhongxing to conquer the north not because Li Zhongxing is the strongest, but because he is the most suitable for this task." Saying this, Kong Lezin paused for a moment. Then he continued, "Li Zhongxing was trained with the treatment of a high-ranking military officer. What was the concept of a senior officer of Shen Lin Jun's military in the Xinwu dynasty? Any one of them would be qualified and capable to hold the commander's seal if they were assigned to a local army. Especially after the baptism of war, Li Zhongxing's growth speed was far beyond everyone's expectations. Even Li Zhongxing's mentor, Luo Su, fell to the point where he could only be on the same level as Zhang Qilin. However, Li Zhongxing became the commander of the southern expedition." Chapter 469. Killing people and destroying their hearts. These 4 words were too appropriate for Lin Yuan's actions. Because Shen Lin Jun's high-ranking officers had been brainwashed from a young age, loyalty to Lei Qiuxing was their life's creed. Even if Lei Qiuxing wanted them to kill their entire family, they wouldn't even frown. Thus, no one would think that Li Zhongxing would completely abandon his loyalty to Lei Qiuxing after only serving Lin Yuan for a short period of time. As long as Lei Qiuxing sent out a secret decree, Li Zhongxing would immediately raise his butcher's knife and lay his hands on the northern aristocratic families and sects. Li Zhongxing could predict that Li Zhongxing would definitely receive Lei Qiuxing's secret decree. This was because from Lei Qiuxing's ambiguous attitude toward the northern frontier, it could be seen that Lei Qiuxing wanted nothing more than to tear Lin Yuan apart with his bare hands. However, he had no choice but to secretly support Lin Yuan's plan to reform the northern frontier. This was because once the northern frontier was reformed, it was bound to soar. At that time, Lei Qiuxing would be able to take Lin Yuan's methods and make some slight modifications before putting them into use. At that time, Lin Yuan would be the scapegoat, while Lei Qiuxing would be able to complete the cleansing of the aristocratic families, sects, and even the entire imperial court, regaining all authority in his own hands. As for the revolutionaries, only those who had revolutionized and become emperors had the right to live. Otherwise, all revolutionaries would not have a good ending. However, since Lin Yuan could predict Lei Qiuxing's and Li Zhongxing's reactions and still sent out Li Zhongxing to lead the crusade against the north, this meant that Lin Yuan was at least 80% certain that the benefits of the crusade against the aristocratic families of the northern frontier would fall into his hands. The only price he would have to pay was the ridicule of the world and the infamy that would be recorded in the history books. But would Lin Yuan care about something like reputation? As a results-oriented person, as long as Lin Yuan could achieve his goal, it was reasonable for him to use any means. He would not lose a single piece of flesh even if he was scolded for a lifetime. In any case, in this world, there were only a handful of people who could judge Lin Yuan, but they were definitely rare. Yet, these people's attitudes towards Lin Yuan were quite friendly. It's truly terrifying. Li Zhong shook his head with a wry smile and commented in a low voice. Future generations will naturally judge Black Jiao's methods. What you and I say doesn't count. Kong Lezin looked at Li Zhong playfully and said with a smile, "What you want to say to me, Black Jiao may have already told Ding Zai." Even if the force that supported Lin Yuan and helped him annex the territory wasn't Shanglu Association, it wouldn't be me who was slow to realize it. Do you think that I, who tried to subvert the northern frontier before and couldn't give him any actual benefits, would still be able to obtain his goodwill? Almost as soon as his voice fell, Li Zhong felt that his entire body had lost its temperature. It was as if his entire body was wrapped in a cold wind, and even a burst of pain came from the surface of his body. That's right. Judging from this situation, you really won't be able to obtain my goodwill. Suddenly, Lin Yuan's voice came from afar. A moment later, Lin Yuan's figure condensed out of thin air. He stood still hundreds of meters away from the two of them and quietly stared at them. Kong Lezin laughed with a strange expression on his face. With his cultivation, he could naturally see that the one hundreds of meters away was not Lin Yuan's actual body, but a projection. However, this method was not something that anyone could use. At least in the four-headed group, there was no such secret method. After all, Lin Yuan's actions meant that he was far away from Taicang City. Not only did he hear their conversation, but he could also conjure a projection that they could see with their naked eyes to communicate with them. Li Zhong was silent for a moment before he slowly raised his head and said, "I'll go clean up the battlefield." With Lin Yuan and Kong Lezin's cultivation and status, there was no place for him to give orders. He didn't even have the right to listen to their conversation. When Li Zhong disappeared from the street, Lin Yuan stared at Kong Lezin and sneered, "Logically speaking, there's no way for an existence like you to survive here. So at first, I planned to keep you in the northern frontier forever, but Ding Zai stopped me." Ha! A faint smile appeared on Kong Lezin's pale face, and he slowly said, "Let's not talk about the gap between our cultivation. Just the gap between the northern frontier and the four-headed group. You should be clear about it, right? In the Qianwu continent, even if you kill the royal family of the 7 great dynasties, we can laugh it off. But if you kill anyone related to the Elysium, even the gods can't save you." Interesting. Lin Yuan still stared at Kong Lezin and said word by word, "But you're tough on the outside but weak on the inside." Seeing Kong Lezin's puzzled expression, Lin Yuan slowly said, "If you're really not afraid that I'll kill you, you'll completely treat my words as fart. Unfortunately, you didn't. Your threat just now, in my eyes, was more like a guilty conscience. Because you and I both know that I'll be related to the Elysium in the future. If I kill you and you kill me, it can only be regarded as an internal dispute. Otherwise, even if you were twice as bold, you wouldn't dare to come to the northern frontier to stir up trouble. So what if I'm tough on the outside but weak on the inside?" Kong Lezin frowned. "But even if it's an internal dispute, if I die, will the four-headed group let you go, and let the northern frontier go?" Lin Yuan gently shook his head and said, "In an internal dispute, the northern frontier is indeed inferior to the four-headed group, but you should know that there are people who want to help you in your hour of need. Now that I've been noticed by the Elysium Guardians, it'll be difficult for me to die even if I want to." Currently, the northern frontier was in high demand in the eyes of the 7 great empires, and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was a veritable gold-swallowing beast. Although the people guarding the Elysium Guardians were certain of the value of the northern frontier, with the existence of a monster like Lin Yuan, they lacked interest in the northern frontier. With Lin Yuan, the northern frontier was destined to rise and soar, and without Lin Yuan, even if the northern frontier would not become the bitter and cold place it was before, it would definitely cause conditions in all aspects to regress. Regardless of Kong Lezin's strength and aptitude, he was still a powerhouse of the four-headed group. He was a comrade to the outside world, but a strong enemy to the inside world. If the four-headed group lost Kong Lezin, who knew how many people would clap their hands and cheer, and even eagerly look forward to the four-headed group finding trouble with Lin Yuan. However, they would definitely not just stand by and watch, but instead fully support Lin Yuan, because in this way, they would gain a powerful ally in the future, and could also weaken the four-headed group, which was also a top force, so why not? It was precisely because he considered this point that Kong Lezin acted tough on the outside but weak on the inside. Because, if Lin Yuan really had that ability, killing him would be equivalent to killing him for nothing. Let's not talk about this anymore, back to the topic at hand. Lin Yuan's gaze paused on Kong Lezin's strange expression for a moment, and suddenly laughed. Chapter 470. Today's situation on the northern frontier is both a blessing and a curse. If I can successfully complete this revolution and start a new era, as those people said, in less than 10 years, no one in the world will be able to shake my position, and no force will have the ability to challenge the northern frontier. So here comes the problem. Because what I lack the most now is time. What makes the northern frontier grow stronger is the chaos of the Shenwu dynasty. As long as the Qingjiang dynasty and the Shuangjian dynasty don't withdraw their troops, the rebels in the Shenwu dynasty will continue. But similarly, once the disaster at the border is solved, the entire Shenwu dynasty will become peaceful the day the army of the Shenwu dynasty returns. At that time, no one will sit and watch the northern frontier swallow up the land, absorb the wealth, and promote the revolution. So on one hand, I have to maintain the current situation on the northern frontier, and on the other hand, I have to pray that the two dynasties won't withdraw their troops too soon. At the same time, everyone knows that the revolution on the northern frontier requires a lot of resources to maintain. For example, the academy on the northern frontier. Like other forces, the dynasties, aristocratic families, and sects can coexist. This is because they have to maintain their greatest suppression while absorbing talents from the entire country. However, it is very difficult to support the entire world with the power of one country. They can only sit and watch the aristocratic families grow stronger, and then absorb talents from the aristocratic families into the imperial court to govern the country. It is unrealistic to replace all the officials on the northern frontier with their own people, because the northern frontier alone can't support so many people. Kong Lezin, what do you think this king should do now? Lin Yuan's lips curled up slightly, as if he was smiling, but there was no smile in his eyes. Stay in the north like a tiger and swallow the aristocratic families like a whale. Only by using the power of the aristocratic families can he grow and strengthen quickly. At least, before the dust settles, he has to have the ability to compete with the big and small forces of the Shenwu dynasty. Kong Lezin thought for a moment and smiled. Although I haven't contacted my superiors for a long time, Ding Zai's identity is not a secret. With him by your side, I think the reason for you to swallow up the north should be solved, right? I can't help you with this matter. Those who were able to cultivate to the peak of their time were naturally not the kind of existences who only focused on cultivation and closed themselves to death. They were not average in all aspects. Not to mention that they were all geniuses who could conquer the world. After all, they had their own specializations. In this regard, Li Zhong was much stronger than Kong Lezin. It was just that these people were still able to easily conquer a region and a place. Lin Yuan analyzed the background, and Kong Lezin quickly realized that Lin Yuan was planning to use him. He just wanted to help Lin Yuan confirm that the annexation of the north of the Shenwu dynasty was a show of support. He wanted the aristocratic families to control the forces they had established. At the same time, he spoke to the other 6 great dynasties. Even if these emperors felt sympathy for him, they didn't have the guts to refute. First of all, falling out with these top forces would not end well. Today's Shenwu dynasty was the best example. It became the enemy of the entire world almost overnight. Even Lei Qiusheng, the emperor who founded the dynasty, was troubled by this, not to mention these aristocratic families who had been guarding the dynasty for dozens of generations. Once something similar happened, it would be a disaster that would destroy the country. Second of all, it was impossible for them to directly attack Lin Yuan. Even Qingjiang and Shuangjian, who were directly connected to the Shenwu dynasty, couldn't openly dispatch an army to suppress Lin Yuan. Even if they didn't have any selfish motives, Lei Qiusheng would be wary of the fact that it was easier to invite a devil in than to send him away. He wouldn't let them pass through. The only way to attack the northern frontier was through the Hengduan mountain range, which was occupied by countless monsters. How many great dynasties would waste their national strength to stand up for Lei Qiusheng? Third of all, it was easy for the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to enter the Hengduan mountain range. Whether these great dynasties recognized it or not, with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, the national treasury would be much more abundant, not to mention the aristocratic families and sects that were connected to the Hengduan mountain range. After all, they didn't have an emperor like Lin Yuan who had almost destroyed all the forces under his rule. It would be more difficult to ask these greedy fellows to give up on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, which was a cash cow, than to ask them to die. Therefore, they would not have to pay a heavy price to support Lin Yuan. They just had to say a few words to express their opinions. As for whether the emperors of the 6 great empires would listen or not, it was not in the consideration of the top forces, because it was absolutely impossible to do as Lin Yuan did in that position and act according to their own likes and dislikes. The first thing they had to think about must be the impact of this matter on the entire dynasty. Since the path of support had been taken by someone else, if they wanted to support Lin Yuan in annexing the north, they could only do their best. Even if the top forces were considered to have spread their branches and leaves in the various great dynasties, there wasn't much power that they could mobilize. Moreover, in this kind of power struggle game, there could only be one winner. Even if the loser didn't die, they would be exiled to the wilderness. Now no one, including Lin Yuan, dared to say that the northern frontier would definitely be the winner who would have the last laugh. The 4 united groups' forces are in the south. With your power, it shouldn't be difficult to control the Ether Society, right? Lin Yuan glanced at Kong Lezin with some surprise and began to plan silently in his heart. He had heard the entire conversation between Kong Lezin and Li Zhong. This madman, who had the intention of subverting the entire northern frontier, had now clearly seen that Lin Yuan wasn't an existence that he could afford to offend. Although he didn't fear Lin Yuan as much as a tiger, Kong Lezin definitely wouldn't reject the opportunity to turn enemies into friends with Lin Yuan. Why did Kong Lezin reject him at this moment? However, Kong Lezin shook his head and said slowly, although the Ether Society isn't much in our eyes, their influence in the secular world isn't small. They control all the evil forces in the Shenwu dynasty, including the 72 linked villages in the north, the Chao gang in the south, and even the small salt merchants listen to their orders. However, we can use this influence, but it's unrealistic for them to be invincible against the Shenwu dynasty. The Ether Society has a round table of 13 people. In name, they're evenly matched, but in reality, only the president has the final say. Speaking up to this point, Kong Lezin paused and said with a playful gaze, "This president is Zhang Xiu." There was no need for Kong Lezin to say the rest. After all, Zhang Xiu was the head of the secret service of the Shenwu dynasty. Regardless of whether he was loyal to Lei Qiuxing or not, or whether he had his own plans, he would definitely not make any mistakes in principle. It would be more difficult for his subordinates to stir up a storm in the south than directly entering the imperial capital and capturing Lei Qiuxing alive. Chapter 471. Is it possible to change the Grand President of the Ether Association? A murderous intent flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. Kong Lezin shook his head and sneered, "Lei Qiuxing is not a muddle-headed person. Do you think that if it were you, and the Demonic Emperor Association could not guarantee their loyalty to you, you would tolerate the Demonic Emperor Association taking root in the northern frontier?" Lin Yuan smiled bitterly to himself, but shook his head honestly. If the Grand President of the Ether Association was not Zhang Xiu, but a force formed by a group of ruffians, then with Lei Qiuxing's stubborn and suspicious character, he would definitely not tolerate the Ether Association taking root in the Shenwu dynasty. Furthermore, even if the degree of the evil forces in the dynasty was not as good as the Ether Associations, with enough equipment, they would be able to stand on equal footing with the various garrisons. It was the same for the Demonic Emperor Association in the northern frontier. It was because they maintained their loyalty to Lin Yuan, and because they were watched by people like Sherdong and Luo Su, that the Demonic Emperor Association could become the leader of the underground forces in the northern frontier. If not for this, when an existence like the Demonic Emperor Association emerged, Lin Yuan would have cut them off with a single slash. Then, what about the evil sect members? Lin Yuan pondered for a moment, then suddenly asked. Kong Lezin choked, and his expression changed. He said in a daze, "You should be clear that those evil sect members are lunatics with problems in their heads. Cooperating with them is no different from asking a tiger for its skin. In order to cause chaos in the south of the Shenwu dynasty, are you sure you want to bring back those evil sect members who have been exiled long ago from the isolated islands overseas? If they can't be dealt with, how will you deal with them?" Although they knew that Lin Yuan had always been unscrupulous in his actions, no matter who it was, they would have a great resistance against the evil sect members. This was especially true for the forces guarding the Heavenly Gate. They could be said to be sworn enemies with the evil cult. After all, the indescribable existences that these lunatics with abnormal minds believed in were all famous existences when the Heavenly Gate opened and countless foreign monsters attacked the Tianwu continent. It was precisely because of the existence of these evil cultists that the fellows on the other side of the Heavenly Gate were able to keep a close eye on the Tianwu continent. It was not the first time that they had eliminated the evil cultists. However, the evil cultists were like rats. When disaster struck, they would find a hole to hide in and wait for the limelight to pass before coming out to wreak havoc. After several elimination operations, although the results were not small, the evil cultists had grown stronger. If we want to kill all the rats, we have to lure them out of the cave. Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with a strange light as he sneered. These evil cultists have been causing trouble for many years. No matter who is in power, they will have to purge them. However, the law of heaven is clear, and it is the cycle of karma. It should be their good fortune to be able to contribute to the people of the world before they die. Hearing this, Kong Lezin shuddered again. He originally thought that he had seen through Lin Yuan thoroughly enough, but he did not expect that he had still underestimated Lin Yuan's ambition. The mere north could not satisfy Lin Yuan's appetite. Now, Lin Yuan wanted to use the fertile land of the north to support the northern frontier. When the climate of the northern frontier was slowly radiating and changing the north, when everything was ready, Lin Yuan could send his troops to the south at any time and swallow the entire Xinwu dynasty into his stomach. In this way, when Lin Yuan finished eating the Xinwu dynasty, wouldn't the other 6 great empires be unable to escape destruction? No wonder. This Black Jiao wanted the north. If what he wanted was the entire Xinwu dynasty, then the other 6 great empires were bound to discover Lin Yuan's ambition and oppose it with all their might. However, as long as Lin Yuan wanted the north, the other 6 great empires would give face to those top forces. The only one in a difficult position was the Xinwu dynasty. At that time, under the instigation of those aristocratic families and sects, the Xinwu dynasty and the northern frontier were bound to have a war. At that time, even if Lin Yuan ate the entire Xinwu dynasty, no one could say anything about Lin Yuan. After all, Lin Yuan was fighting back after being beaten. However, Lin Yuan had already said so. Even Kong Lezin had to think twice. If he did not tie himself to Lin Yuan, would Lin Yuan let him leave safely? It won't work. I don't have a channel to contact those evil cult members. Kong Lezin shook his head again and said in a deep voice, "Since you are the successor of the demon court, you should know that the guardians of the heavenly gate and those evil cult members can be said to be irreconcilable. As long as we catch their members or strongholds, the first reaction is to give them a destructive blow. It is also because of this strategy that we slowly peel back the silk from the cocoon and suppress the evil cult members from all over the world to an isolated island overseas to struggle at death's door. If we lure them back and something big happens, I'm afraid no one will be able to bear it." Kong Lezin was telling the truth this time, but his tone was undoubtedly a lot more relaxed. The meaning was very clear. If the Black Jiao could contact those evil cult members and had the ability to lead them to the Tianwu continent, then the 4 united group could turn a blind eye and let these evil cult members wreak havoc in the south. However, the prerequisite was that Lin Yuan had to come up with a comprehensive plan to ensure that he had enough ability and sincerity. After using the evil cult members, he would catch them all in one fell swoop. Rats are rats. They won't let go of the opportunity to steal fish. The corners of Lin Yuan's mouth curled up even more. He sneered and said, "As long as there is a chance to return to the Tianwu continent, they will definitely spare no effort. However, the rats will definitely not all come out of their nests at once. We have to let them taste the sweetness. When the main forces of the rats on the isolated island are transferred to the Tianwu continent, your people can cooperate with the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas to kill all the rats left behind. As for the group on the Tianwu continent, I will deal with them cleanly." Kong Lezin closed his eyes and thought for a moment before saying in a hoarse voice, "Okay, I will go back and help you with the operation." When his voice fell, Lin Yuan's projections slowly dissipated. Persuading a person was not enough to rely on sincerity alone. Lin Yuan did not hide his hostility towards Kong Lezin from the beginning in order to make him fear him. Then, he would analyze the situation on the northern frontier and tell him part of his plan. In this way, Kong Lezin would definitely consider that if he did not agree, Lin Yuan would definitely not let him leave the northern frontier safely. Under such conditions, Kong Lezin would no longer doubt that Lin Yuan did not have the ability to keep him here. Since Lin Yuan dared to tell him his plan, he was not worried that he would leak it out. In other words, if he did not agree to this matter, he would die on the northern frontier. In fact, whether Lin Yuan had the ability to kill Kong Lezin or not, perhaps only he knew. It was not an exaggeration to call this conversation a huge gamble. However, from the current situation, Lin Yuan was sure that he had won the gamble. Chapter 472. Lord Shifter Emperor, you really have good means. Ding Zai, who also saw this scene through the projection, had a look of regret on his face. In Ding Zai's view, an existence like Kong Lezun was already quite a great figure. But such a figure would also be controlled by Lin Yuan, and was dominated by Lin Yuan from the beginning to the end. Ding Zai suddenly felt that the narrow-mindedness he played before was laughable. Just as Li Zhong said, Lin Yuan's control of people's hearts had already reached the level of perfection. With such an ability, even if Lin Yuan was a trash without any cultivation, he could still sit at the top of the secular world and become one of the people at the top of the food chain. I'm just guiding the situation. Lin Yuan shook his head gently, but there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. He originally wanted to use the hands of the Four United Group to stir up chaos in the south, but Kong Lezun rejected this matter, causing Lin Yuan to punch cotton with all his strength. If he hadn't grasped Kong Lezun's mentality and modified part of the follow-up plan, the conversation between the two was destined to end on a sour note. However, they failed to achieve their goal of having the quadripartite gang fight Lei Qiusheng personally. In exchange, they only obtained a condition that could lure the cultists to the south of Shenwu Imperial City to attack Lei Qiusheng. However, the troubles that needed to be solved did not decrease, but instead increased. Whether it was the Four United Group or other forces, it was impossible for them to sit back and watch the evil cult grow stronger in the south. Even with Lin Yuan's guarantee, after a cat saw a mouse, even if they had the intention to play, they would not hold back for long. And the most important problem was that Lin Yuan had to persuade the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas to join forces with these top forces to eliminate the evil cult. However, although most of the monsters of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas were born and raised in the Four Seas of the Tianwu continent, it still couldn't be changed. They were a race from the other side of the Tianwu continent. It was just that they didn't have any malice towards the Tianwu continent and even provided some help, so they weren't killed or expelled. If it weren't for the two being of the same origin, the monsters of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas wouldn't tolerate the evil cult in their territory. It was just that no one could imagine how heavy this relationship was. Whether the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas is in cahoots with the cultists or just simply cares about the feelings of fellow countrymen, these two attitudes completely represent whether Lin Yuan's plan is feasible or not. Looks like I have to make a trip to the West Sea Dragon Palace. Lin Yuan sighed silently in his heart. Back then, he had killed that old Jiao snake because he had a chance of entering the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. That was why he had disregarded the mountain-shaking ape, the overlord of the Stoneclaw Forest, and attacked him. However, because of that Jiao snake, Ao Qian of the West Sea Dragon Palace had joined in. After thanking Lin Yuan for helping out, no other demonic beast dared to make a fuss about this matter. After all, the Dragon Palace of the West Sea didn't care about Lin Yuan killing the dragon bloodline demonic beast. Then, what could they, a group of monsters that had nothing to do with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, join in the fun? Later, when Lin Yuan became the hot new star of the Hengduan mountain range, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas also extended an olive branch. However, Lin Yuan casually refused and didn't intend to go to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. However, Ao Qian obviously didn't intend to give up just like that. Instead, she directly stayed in the northern frontier for a long time. It seemed that if Lin Yuan didn't want to go back with her, she wouldn't go back either. However, as Lin Yuan's ambition grew day by day, if they continued to ignore the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, it would only embarrass everyone. The Tianwu continent was a circular continent. The 7 empires were all connected to the Hengduan mountain range in the center. However, they were also connected to the ocean controlled by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Especially for a weak existence like the Shenwu dynasty, if they wanted to trade with the other 6 empires, they could only trade with the Qingjiang Empire and the Shuangjin Empire. However, in that way, the speed of the rise of the country's strength would obviously be slower than that of the other empires. Over time, the gap between them would only become bigger and bigger. This was also the reason why Lei Qiusheng still wanted to make things convenient for Lin Yuan, even though he couldn't wait to tear Lin Yuan apart. After all, the Hengduan mountain range was a trade route that connected the 7 empires. It was really important. Of course, Lin Yuan could continue to ignore the Dragon Palace of the West Sea. However, if he did that, after Lin Yuan annexed the entire Shenwu dynasty, it would be too late for him to ease the relationship with the Dragon Palace of the West Sea. He could only watch as the sea monsters wreaked havoc in the south of his territory year after year, dragging down most of his troops and energy, repeating the mistake of the Wanjian Empire. But then again, even humans didn't have saints, let alone demonic beasts. Once Lin Yuan left, the Hengduan mountain range would definitely be turned upside down. First of all, the monsters who were also qualified to compete for the position of Beast Lord would not miss this good opportunity to attack Lin Yuan. They would all complain to the Monster Palace, hinting that Lin Yuan did not care about the Hengduan mountain range at all. Instead, he cared more about his own dragon bloodline. Otherwise, why would he personally go to the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas? The current Lin Yuan's strength might not be enough, but in terms of influence and wealth, Lin Yuan was an existence comparable to the Great Beast King. Naturally, he was qualified to participate in the Monster Palace's discussions. However, during this period of time, Lin Yuan did not attend the monthly meetings of the Monster Palace. The last time he went to the Monster Palace was because the Green Swamp clan had caused a huge ruckus. He had no choice but to go and settle it. In addition, even if these monsters who were listed as candidates for the position of Beast Lord did not succeed, they could not be careless. After all, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce brought in a large amount of income every year. This was something that the Hengduan Mountain Range's Beast Kings had witnessed with their own eyes. It was only because Lin Yuan gave them a large amount of dividends that they had no choice but to put away their greedy faces. In addition, everyone had benefited from it. If they went to provoke Lin Yuan or the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, they would be cutting off everyone's source of income. However, with Lin Yuan's departure, it was unknown how many monsters would covet the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. They might even join forces and ask Lin Yuan to give them a larger share of the profits, or even part of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's control. Although Lin Yuan could suppress these voices when he was around, once Lin Yuan left, these voices would emerge. Now that the Northern Frontier could not do without the blood of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, with Li Zhong's personality, he would definitely agree to some unreasonable demands. He would only think about how he could get back at them in the future. Who knows? Maybe he would agree to some unreasonable demands. Just thinking about it made Lin Yuan feel a splitting headache. There were too many troubles. However, he had no choice but to divert a large amount of energy to deal with this matter. Chapter 473. 3 days later. The imperial capital of the Shenwu dynasty. Lei Qiuxing had a gloomy expression as he dismissed the courtiers who were waiting for his orders. Then, he strode back to the imperial harem. Because he had personally smashed the imperial study into pieces, Lei Qiuxing would return to his palace after he finished his court hearings. He would wait for some of his trusted aides to report on the happenings outside the imperial capital. Your Majesty. As soon as he entered the Yangxin Palace Hall, Lei Qiuxing heard a deep voice. Just like how Lin Yuan knew how to use Luo Su to keep Sherdong in check, Lei Qiuxing, as an ambitious and ruthless person, knew how to keep things in check. Even though the embroidered uniform guard was in charge on the surface and Zhang Xiu had the help of the Ether Association after he left the imperial court, this did not mean that Zhang Xiu was the only spy chief of the Shenwu dynasty. It also did not mean that he was Lei Qiuxing's only trusted aide. How is the situation in the south? As the two were too familiar with each other, Lei Qiuxing skipped the hypocritical greetings and went straight to the point. The owner of the deep voice walked out of the shadows behind the door and said expressionlessly, "It's not good. The Qingpeng king will not send troops to suppress the rebels in the short term. To him, even if he sweeps through the entire south, he will just return to Qingpeng to be a king. This is obviously not in line with his original intention of risking universal condemnation. Therefore, I guess that the Qingpeng king wants to wait for the rebels in the south to make a move first before he can reap the benefits." At this point, he paused with a complicated expression and said in a low voice, "In addition, according to the information provided by my spies, the Qingpeng king is extremely dissatisfied with the king of the northern frontier sending troops to suppress the rebels in the north. He spent a large sum of money to hire a large number of Shuangjian dynasty's Shueliao knights. There are about 50,000 of them. They should be an established knight group. He then used his connections to send them to the northern frontier. As for what happened after that, because my spies in the northern frontier were all wiped out by the Demon Emperor Association, I have no way of knowing. Zhang Xiu might know more details, but it shouldn't be much." Under the light of the noon sun, his face was revealed without a doubt. He was 90% similar to Lei Qiuxing, except that his deep black eyes were less aggressive and more profound. His name was Shadow, and he was a war orphan adopted by Lei Qiuxing's father. His face was extremely similar to Lei Qiuxing's, and he looked more like Lei Qiuxing's biological brother than Lei Qiuxing. However, the two of them were not related by blood. Because they were worried that the Shadow would impersonate Lei Qiuxing and cause trouble in the harem, the Shadow was castrated by Lei Qiuxing's father when he was very young. However, the two of them had lived and eaten together since young, and their relationship was better than that of biological brothers. Therefore, after Lei Qiuxing ascended the throne, the Shadow naturally became the head of the eunuchs. He was in charge of the servants' administration and was responsible for Lei Qiuxing's meals and lodging in the palace. If it was not for the fact that there was no one around him that he could use, Lei Qiuxing would definitely not let the Shadow leave the palace. Due to some special reasons, the rulers of the various empires were not allowed to step over the threshold of the Heaven Star Realm. For example, Lei Qiuxing ascending the throne as a Heaven Star Realm cultivator was already an exception. If he were to enter the Void Star Realm, the entire Shenwu dynasty would be faced with a calamity. Therefore, the Shadow was both a servant and Lei Qiuxing's strongest bodyguard. If it was not for the rise of the Association of the Demon Emperor, which caused the remnants of the Jiao clan to have difficulty even lingering on at death's door, Lei Qiuxing would not have the guts to send the Shadow to the south. This was because there were too many people who wanted to kill him. Among them, there was no lack of existences in the late stage of the Heaven Star Realm or even the Void Star Realm. Pang! Lei Qiuxing smashed a large door made of agarwood with a punch and said fiercely, "Good, very good. It seems that this brother of mine will not tolerate me for even a day." The Shenwu dynasty had more than 10 million troops. The reason why 80% of the troops were held back by the 10 million troops of the two empires was because it was easy to defend a city, but difficult to defend a country. While ensuring that they would not be at a disadvantage on the battlefield, the Shenwu dynasty's army had to set up layers of checkpoints and strictly guard the borders, fearing that small groups of enemy troops would sneak into the country. But now the dignified Qingpeng king, the Lei clan's Lei Qiuxing, who held the most authority apart from Lei Qiuxing, and even had an extremely high reputation in the army, had personally used his connections to send 50,000 Shueliao knights into the Shenwu dynasty. It must be known that now that Shen Linjun had gone on an expedition to the south, the imperial city's defense was extremely empty. Today, Lei Qiuxing had sent these Shuangjian barbarian soldiers into the northern frontier. In the future, he would be able to send these Shueliao barbarian soldiers to the outside of the imperial city. With the imperial guards formed by the second-generation young masters of the general family, they would probably be able to make the elite Shueliao knights throw away their helmets and armor in a single encounter. It was fine if he didn't know about this before, but now that he knew about this matter, Lei Qiuxing felt like there was a knife hanging over his head. There were two ways to resolve this matter. The first was to investigate thoroughly and detain all the officers involved in the Shueliao Knights' entry, then replace them with trusted aides. This was the safest method. However, as the saying went, one should not air one's dirty linen in public. Now that the Shenwu dynasty was facing internal and external threats, the Qingpeng king, as a descendant of the imperial family, had colluded with the enemy. Although it couldn't be said to be a traitor, it was still a great offense. In addition, the war on both sides was tense, and changing the commander at the last minute was also a great taboo for military strategists. Whether it was the former Wanjian dynasty general Lei Qiuxing or the current Shenwu dynasty emperor Lei Qiuxing, neither of them would choose this path. However, it was clearly not Lei Qiuxing's character to pretend that he didn't know about this problem. After muttering to himself for a moment, Lei Qiuxing sighed heavily and furrowed his brows. This news was most likely purposely released by Lei Qiuming to let you know. He knew that I wouldn't settle the score now, so he could only choose the safest method to resolve this. Pass down my orders. Shen Linjun is to leave immediately and return to the imperial capital from the south. There must be no delays. But this way. The Shadow's face revealed a troubled expression. He hesitated and said, "Right now, the only elite that your majesty can mobilize is Shen Linjun. If they don't participate in the war in the south, then how the situation in the south evolves will be up to the Qingpeng king. Because of the chaos in the south, most places haven't even planted spring seeds. If this drags on, we won't be able to collect taxes this year and next. The expenses of other places can be reduced, but the salaries, food, and pensions of the soldiers on the front lines can't be paid by the palace treasury and national treasury. The taxes in the south took up 70% of the Shunwu dynasty's revenue. If this revenue couldn't be put into the treasury, just dragging it out would be enough to drag the Shunwu dynasty to death. Because they really couldn't take out much money in food, Lei Qiusheng had no choice but to compromise. He first recruited the two biggest rebel leaders in the north and south to suppress the other rebels. The goal was to quickly end the internal conflict and return everything to the right track. Chapter 474. This lonely one naturally has a way to deal with this. Go and pass down the order. Lei Qiusheng naturally didn't have many taboos towards this brother who had grown up with him. Even if the Shadow's words were overstepping his bounds, Lei Qiusheng didn't have any intention of blaming him. In their hearts they were the same person. As long as the Shadow existed, Lei Qiusheng could do many things that he couldn't do but wanted to do. Lei Qiusheng bitterly laughed as he thought of this. He muttered, "But this way, that Black Jiao will benefit from it. If it can help this lonely one pass this trial, then we'll still have a chance to fight. But if it can't pass this trial, then we'll all be finished together." The Shadow clearly saw a trace of ruthlessness in Lei Qiusheng's eyes as he spoke. The Shadow quickly connected the dots to the Black Jiao on the northern frontier. What kind of help could the Shunwu dynasty bring to the Shunwu dynasty, and what kind of disastrous rewards the Shunwu dynasty would have to pay? Yes. The Shadow bowed and withdrew. At the same time, he reached out and imprinted a metal mask on his face. Because Shadow's appearance resembled that of an emperor, he would only reveal his true face in front of Lei Qiusheng. Normally, he would show his face in front of others with this iron mask, so he was also called Eunuch Tai by others. In the tiny land of the imperial city, those important ministers of the imperial court dared to offend Lei Qiusheng on the grounds of loyalty, but there was absolutely no one who dared to provoke this Eunuch Tai whose shadow loomed over the entire imperial city. After the Shadow left, Zhang Xiu walked in confidently from outside. As one of Lei Qiusheng's trusted aides, Zhang Xiu knew many of Lei Qiusheng's secrets. However, he also knew Lei Qiusheng's absolute taboos. For example, if Zhang Xiu came to report on his work when he met with the Shadow, he had the right to stand outside and listen in. However, he absolutely couldn't take a single step in. If he saw the Shadow's face, then he wouldn't be able to escape death. At least 4 masters of the embroidered uniform guard had died because of their arrogance and disregard for the taboo of Lei Qiusheng. As one of the most intelligent people in the world, Zhang Xiu naturally would not violate this taboo. Since you've heard it, I don't have to waste my breath. Write the decree and have Li Zhongxing make his move now. When Lei Qiusheng's voice fell, it was as if he had aged 10 years in the blink of an eye. His entire spirit seemed to have weakened. He knew that his decree would be perfectly carried out by Li Zhongxing, and he also knew that the Black Jiao, whom he viewed as a formidable opponent, had long since planted countless backups around Li Zhongxing. If he wrote the decree for Li Zhongxing to make his move against the northern noble families, then all of the benefits would be swallowed up by the Black Jiao. At the same time, he would announce to the entire north that no one could stop the Black Jiao's edge. Once the Black Jiao swallowed up the northern territory, the next step would be to dominate the Wei River and rule across the river from him. Who would have the last laugh would depend entirely on luck and skill. Zhang Xiu gave a slight nod and did not say anything else. Instead, he quickly walked to Lei Qiusheng's desk and began to write at a rapid pace. Lei Qiusheng would never touch imperial edicts. Once Zhang Xiu finished writing the decree, he would give it a cursory look and then directly stamp it with his personal seal before sending it out. If these edicts were intercepted by others or caused irreparable consequences, then it would naturally be Zhang Xiu stealing the imperial seal and sending out fake edicts. In any case, the fire would not burn him. Lei Qiusheng leaned against the doorframe and stared in a daze at Zhang Xiu, who was writing at a rapid pace. He softly said, "You and I are lord and subject and also close friends. Tell me, is this humble one's actions saving the country or destroying it?" Zhang Xiu stopped writing and thought for a moment before slowly saying, "Your Majesty, what do you think of the Black Jiao? Formidable opponent, national scholar, virtuous talent, ambitious and ruthless." Lei Qiusheng gave out one title after another almost without hesitation. Then he sighed and said, "Unfortunately, he is a monster. If he was a human, even if I had to rule the country with him, I would take him under my wing." "What about the Azure Crown Prince?" Zhang Xiu asked again. Lei Qiusheng pondered for a moment before replying, "Indecisive, only caring about immediate benefits. To think that I thought he was a talent that could be molded. However, after all these years, not only did he not improve, he has even fallen. If he has the last laugh, my Xinwu dynasty will definitely fall in his hands. Zhang Xiu slowly raised his head and stared at Lei Qiusheng. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty's merits are unparalleled. Even if you are not an emperor throughout the ages, you can still be considered a rare wise ruler. Otherwise, you would not have cleaned up the mess left behind by the cursed Star Sea into today's peaceful and prosperous world. However, I have a few words that I have to say." As his voice faded, Zhang Xiu said word by word, "Now that the Black Jiao has matured, even if your Majesty fights with it, you only have a 50% chance of winning. If Lei Qiuming is in this position, my Xinwu dynasty, from the king to the commoners, will all become bones in the grave. Your Majesty, please do not care about personal feelings and face. You must not leave any hope for the Azure Crown Prince." Zhang Xiu's words were like 5 bolts of lightning. Lei Qiusheng was instantly stunned. Just as Zhang Xiu said, even if he fought with the Black Jiao, he only had a 50% chance of winning. If the chaos in the south was not quelled, the Black Jiao's actions would become even more unscrupulous. It could even directly cut off the annual tribute. As the saying goes, an emperor does not lack hungry soldiers. If he did not have the money and rations in his hands, he would naturally be embarrassed to command the various armies. The scales of victory were slowly tilting towards the Black Jiao. It might not even have a 50% chance of winning. Therefore, the chaos in the south must be quelled, and it must be done swiftly and without leaving behind any future troubles. Otherwise, Lei Qiusheng would lose the bargaining chip to contend against Lin Yuan. Lei Qiuming must die. Lei Qiusheng raised his head and stared at the sky. After a while, he said this with some difficulty. Lei Qiusheng was indeed a tyrannical ruler who could not tolerate sand in his eyes. However, he also had a lot of feelings for his family. Otherwise, he could even banish Yan Xingqi. However, he was exceptionally lenient towards Lei Qiuming, who also had an extremely high prestige in the army and had great potential. He even conferred him to Green Peng, which was also far away from the imperial capital. Different from Yan Xingqi, conferring the title of Green Peng King was not a banishment. It was because Green Peng Mountain was high and far away from the imperial capital. Although there were marine monsters invading the land, it was much better than the Hengduan mountain range, which was surrounded by monsters. At least the marine monsters did not have any deep hatred with the human race. When they invaded the land, it was purely to reduce the population of their race. However, the monster tides in the Hengduan mountain range were all filled with bone-deep hatred and would easily fight with their lives. In Green Peng King, other than having to pay tribute to the imperial court every year, it was no different from the current Lin Yuan. In Lei Qiuming's own territory, he was the supreme ruler. It was not even a problem for him to establish his own little imperial court. Chapter 475. Otherwise, Lei Qiuming wouldn't have been able to summon hundreds of thousands or even millions of regular soldiers. It wasn't that he didn't have the ability to rally supporters or connections. It was just that the treatment of a regular army and a temporary rebel army was completely different. It was clear that not every noble clan could raise a regular army that could contend with any army. Moreover, they had rebelled for the sake of profit, not for the sake of the throne. Now that Lei Qiusheng had sentenced Lei Qiuming to death, there would be no lack of internal struggle. But in the end, reason prevailed over emotion, allowing Zhang Xiu to breathe a sigh of relief. This lowly subject will take care of this matter. Zhang Xiu had also finished writing the edict. His expression was as calm as an ancient well. He said indifferently, "The Ether Society will be buried with him. It won't be a disgrace to this prince." By the time he finished speaking, Zhang Xiu had already handed the drafted edict to Lei Qiusheng. In order to show that this wasn't Lei Qiusheng's will, this edict was completely written in plain language. Only the person who received the edict knew the meaning behind it. Even if an outsider saw this edict, they wouldn't be able to attack Lei Qiusheng. At most, they would only attack Zhang Xiu. However, moving Zhang Xiu to the embroidered uniform guard was just a small matter to them. But the revenge of the embroidered uniform guard and the Ether Society wasn't something that an ordinary person could endure. Moreover, this secret edict would not pass through the hands of a third person. Zhang Xiu would personally bring it out of the royal palace and hand it over to Li Zhongxing. Even the most daring person would not dare to oppose Zhang Xiu in the royal palace. After all, Zhang Xiu was in charge of the embroidered guard. Although his power in the royal palace was not as great as the shadows, who in the court did not have a few things that could be used against him that could cause their heads to fall into his hands. Go. Lei Qiuxing nodded slightly, but the ripples in his eyes showed that his heart wasn't calm. 4 hours later. Northern Frontier Prince's estate. Luo Su and Shi Dong sat on the left and right, respectively. Lin Yuan sat on a cushion, quietly waiting. A moment later, 2 white pigeons flew into the hall and landed on their wrists. As the messenger pigeons used by the Council of the Fey Emperor and the embroidered uniform guard to send messages, they weren't the type that could be easily shot down and used as barbecue food. They were pure-blooded monsters through and through. Every pigeon that could cross the Wei River to send messages was at least at the initial stage of wisdom. If they encountered human cultivators, they would be able to fight. This was one of the support the Fei's royal court had given Lin Yuan to support. Luo Su took off the small bamboo tube tied to the carrier pigeon's leg and poured out the letter inside. Then, he glanced at the string of numbers on the paper, and a hint of joy flashed through his eyes. He said in a low voice, "The secret edict has been sent out from the imperial capital. That emperor, who seems to be sitting calmly on the fishing boat, seems to have understood the consequences of not pacifying the south." Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, "Let the embroidered uniform guards hibernating in the Southern Expedition Army move. They must kill all the members of the embroidered uniform guards who have confirmed their identities as soon as possible. Even if they are suspected, they must be put under house arrest immediately. Send Mr. Gao to lead the Fallen Star Army to meet up with Li Zhongxing. Prepare to transport the spoils of war back to the northern frontier. Be careful." Although he knew that Lei Qiuxing was making a move to let him take advantage of the situation, Lin Yuan knew that Lei Qiuxing was someone who didn't like to be taken advantage of. Even if he knew that he had to take advantage of this situation, he had to find a way to disgust him. Fortunately, Zhang Xiu was a Heaven's Dipper realm cultivator. Although his speed wasn't slow, it would take him at least half a day to reach Li Zhongxing's tent from the imperial capital. Lin Yuan still had enough time to plan the operation and ensure that nothing would go wrong. Luo Su nodded slightly. He cupped his fists at Lin Yuan, then turned and walked out. Only then did Shi Dong slowly stand up and say, "There's news from the south. With Mr. Li Xin acting as the middleman, we've successfully contacted 8 evil cults. 5 of them are very interested in returning to the Tianwu continent. As long as the south is in chaos, they will immediately send people to the south. There's no need to wait. Send a reply to Qin Yu. Tell him to immediately create chaos in the coastal areas and lure those evil cults into the trap." A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes. He said in a low voice, "Lei Qiuxing wants to end this quickly. This king won't let him have his way. When the chaos in the south will end, it's not up to him. This king has the final say." "No." Li Zhong walked in and cupped his fists. "Lei Qiuxing wants to end this quickly. It must be because he has realized that if he wants to have a showdown with the Dragon King and not give up the country, the chaos in the south must end as soon as possible. If he can't see any hope, he will definitely find a way to suppress our northern frontier. What can he do to us?" Shi Dong frowned somewhat unhappily. He didn't care about his tone at all. During the rebellion of the 3 cities, because Lin Yuan was coincidentally not in the northern frontier, Li Zhong had to take charge of the situation. This northern frontier king violated the law and led his own palace guards from Shunning City to Taicang City to quell the rebellion. After returning to Shunning City, in order to show the authority of the new northern frontier law, Li Zhong didn't hesitate to put himself in a prison wagon and paraded himself through the streets of Shunning City for 3 days. He also announced that he would be imprisoned for half a year. During this half year, he couldn't step out of the palace in the northern frontier. If he violated this rule, he would be killed without mercy. Of course, this was because Li Zhong had his own reasons for doing so. In addition, many people in the northern frontier spontaneously came to offend this king who reduced their taxes and gave them land to cultivate. Therefore, Li Zhong was spared the death penalty. In his first announcement, he was going to commit suicide in the newly built central square of Shunning City. Of course, even if these people didn't spontaneously come to offend Li Zhong, there would still be other people who would do this. Although this kind of show couldn't fool the truly smart people, everyone knew that a new era had begun in the northern frontier. The change of 3 northern frontier kings proved that the monarchy was bestowed by God. Li Zhong violated the northern frontier law and punished himself, which proved that the king was under the law. From then on, there was only one voice left in the northern frontier, and that was the law of the northern frontier. As the author of the new northern frontier law, Lin Yuan could change the rules of the northern frontier law at any time, delete or add new rules. At this time, Black Jiao, who had been behind the scenes, became the ruler of the northern frontier, whether in fact or in name. During the 6 months of imprisonment, Li Zhong didn't call himself Gu. In other words, during this time, he wasn't the king of the northern frontier, but a criminal. Therefore, Sherdong didn't give Li Zhong any face. Chapter 476. What can they do to us? Li Zhong sneered and looked at Sherdong from the corner of his eyes. He said coldly, if our territory is only at the northern frontier, the Xinwu Empire can't do anything to us. But don't forget, we're going to take over the entire north. This means that our territory is starting to border with the Shuangjian dynasty. As long as Lei Qiusheng doesn't see any hope of victory, he will definitely choose to die together with us. Sherdong didn't respond to Li Zhong's words. Instead, his expression changed and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. As one of the 2 spies in the northern frontier, Sherdong was not only aware of the movements in the northern frontier, but he also knew the level of the opponents he was about to face. There was no need to mention the Xinwu Emperor of the Xinwu dynasty. From the fact that the imperial guards had planted spies right under the nose of the emperor, it was enough to prove how much Lin Yuan valued Lei Qiusheng as an opponent. Of course, as their territory expanded, they would have to face more opponents than just Lei Qiusheng. The territory in the north was bordered by the barbarians of the Shuangjian dynasty. Now, whether it was the north or the northern frontier, both belonged to Lei Qiusheng. In order to save face, Lei Qiusheng had no choice but to maintain the situation of fighting on 2 fronts. However, once Lei Qiusheng decided to die together with them, he only needed to withdraw the army in the north. The northern frontier would then have to face the countless cavalry of the Shuangjian dynasty. In this way, most of the troops would be restrained. On the other hand, Lei Qiusheng only needed to guard a small part of the front line and could also transfer a large number of troops to support the south. As the spies in the shadows, Sherdong knew that the Xinwu dynasty would definitely not be so kind as to hand over the camps and fortifications they had painstakingly built to the northern frontier. Once the situation developed to that point, it would mean that the soldiers of the northern frontier would have to fight to the death with the barbarians of the Shuangjian dynasty in the wilderness. They would have to sacrifice some people to buy time and give up some land to build a new line of defense behind the original line of defense. However, that would require a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of sacrifices. Money, food, and sacrifices were not a problem for the current northern frontier. However, the time and manpower consumed would determine whether their side could have the last laugh in the crucial battle that was to come. Of course, while Lei Qiusheng was considering dying together with the enemy, he would not give up on his empire and reputation. As long as the northern frontier did not clash with the enemy, the front line in the north would continue to be maintained until both sides were prepared to fight to the death. If they allowed the barbarians of the Shuangjian dynasty to enter the north, it would bring even greater losses to the northern frontier. Therefore, this was a trump card and also the biggest problem the northern frontier had to face. The south will definitely be in chaos, but not for as long as it lasts. Li Zhong bowed to Lin Yuan again and said with a smile, the chaos in the south has to be quelled before Lei Qiusheng loses his patience. At the very least, we have to let the south resume production and let Lei Qiusheng see hope that he can receive money and food into the warehouse after autumn. Therefore, we have to try to quell the north as soon as possible. The sooner we do so, the less pressure we have to face. By the time we're ready, those barbarians won't be so deadly. What will teacher teach me? Lin Yuan asked with great interest. With Li Zhong's personality, even though he knew he was putting on a show, a punishment was still a punishment. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, Li Zhong would never rashly come here to meet him. Therefore, when he realized the sinister intentions of the Xinwu dynasty, Li Zhong had been thinking about how to deal with it. He couldn't think of a solution, so he definitely wouldn't be able to see Li Zhong today. Otherwise, this proud scholar would at most send someone over to deliver a message. Fortify at every step and clear the field. The corners of Li Zhong's mouth curled up slightly. His expression suddenly became confident as he explained his plan. After all, the goal of the southern expedition wasn't just for territory. Li Zhongxing had also obtained Lei Qiuxing's secret edict, so their goal was already 80% complete. Next, they just had to wait to reap the benefits. After wiping out the aristocratic families and sects in the north, a large amount of money, food, and supplies would be sent directly to the northern frontier. The Shuangjin dynasty's love of plundering was their biggest weakness. If they didn't do anything, it would be equivalent to a wasted trip and they wouldn't get any benefits. Therefore, the barbarians would definitely continue to go deeper. By the time they passed Shangdai City, they would have entered the hinterland of the north. By then, they would be exhausted. If they could launch a surprise attack on the barbarians at this time, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. However, the prerequisite was that Lin Yuan had successfully swept through the entire north and carried out the strategy of clearing the field with vertical walls. Otherwise, the barbarians would not continue to go deeper into the northern frontier. After all, Lin Yuan controlled the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and had the support of a top force behind him. If it wasn't necessary, even the cruel and belligerent Shuangjin dynasty wouldn't think of wiping out Lin Yuan completely. This was because it would only cause the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, which had brought them endless wealth, to disappear. This would cause their overall national strength to be unable to keep up with the development of the other major dynasties. What these barbarians lack is not money or food. The reason why they raid the neighboring dynasties every year is because of their customs and habits. However, this group of wolves living in the grasslands also has the same fatal weakness as wolves. As long as they are hurt, they will run away with their tails between their legs. Before they recover from their injuries, they will definitely not have any ideas about the northern frontier. Li Zhongxing rubbed his forehead and continued, "After we defeat these barbarians, we'll use Donglin City as the center to build a ramp-like wall with cement. Then, we can forever isolate the Shuangjian dynasty's barbarians from our territory. Unless they can pass through the Shenwu dynasty's defense line and cross the Wei River to attack us." Yes, cement. With Lin Yuan's ability, it was impossible for him to make cement, which could be said to be a divine construction tool. However, after Lin Yuan learned the general formula of cement and investigated the entire Hengduan mountain range, he found many substitutes. With the help of the heroes of the northern frontier, he finally made cement, which could be said to be a treasure of good quality and cheap price. Otherwise, the Northern Frontier Academy in Shunning City would not have been built so quickly. Using cement to build a great wall to isolate the Shuangjian dynasty's barbarians from our territory? In Lin Yuan's opinion, this proposal was very promising. The Shenwu dynasty's heavy infantry was very powerful and could even fight head-on with demonic beasts. However, compared to the barbarian knights who came and went like the wind, they were definitely much easier to deal with. After all, even if they could not defeat Lin Yuan's army, it would not be a problem for them to find a way to escape. Chapter 477. Lin Yuan was in the north, but Shenwu dynasty was like that. There were not many places suitable for raising horses. Although they were close to the Frost Mirror grassland, they were much weaker than the Shuangjian dynasty. Therefore they could not get many war horses. The main body of the army was made up of infantrymen. Otherwise, they would not be famous for being heavy infantrymen. After all, the Shuangjian barbarian could hardly break through their defense line. Even the Qingjiang crossbowmen, who were known as the best crossbowmen in the 7 dynasties, could not break through. The northern frontier, which was also in the Shenwu dynasty's territory, was the same. The main body of the army was still made up of infantrymen. However, the heavy infantrymen trained by Lin Yuan were obviously not as good as those of the Shenwu dynasty. After all, they were well equipped. Besides, their generals had been honed on the battlefield with Lei Qiuxing. They could command these heavy infantrymen easily. It was not a problem for them to resist the charge of the Shuangjian barbarian. However, the northern frontier of today, it was estimated that the Black Water Army had to be called back from the south to fight the Shuangjian dynasty head-on. Of course, Li Zhong did not mean to look down on the army of the northern frontier. On the contrary, he had given the army of the northern frontier a very high evaluation. Excluding the reserves that Lei Fan brought from Shenlin Jun, the current northern battlefront army was made up of soldiers of varying quality. They could not do anything to the demonic beasts of the wisdom state. In terms of fighting ability, they were not as good as those demon slayers who had been hunting in and out of the Hungduan Mountains all year round. However, the great enemy in front of the northern frontier was the elite army of the two dynasties. In addition to the extravagant Black Water army built by Lin Yuan, only Gao Buzhan and the 5,000 old Fallen Star army soldiers could compete with these elite troops who had been famous for a long time. However, in a major battle with millions or tens of millions of people, the role of 5,000 people could play was minimal. They either served as the personal guards of the commander-in-chief to guard the headquarters, or were assigned to various subordinate sequences to supervise the soldiers and not retreat in battle. Other than that, there was almost no other use. If Lin Yuan did not plan and only considered his strength on paper, he could already wait for death at this moment. However, the northern frontier was improving all the time. The southern expedition was going through the baptism of war. After they got used to the battlefield and followed by cultivation and war training, they would be a qualified regular army. Even if they were not as good as the enemy, they would not be defeated before the enemy. Let's do it this way. Lin Yuan slowly opened his eyes and said calmly, "This is a dangerous move. If we fail, we will be doomed. While there is still time, those who are training the troops and those who are thinking about the details should leave." Yes. Li Zhong and Shi Dong cupped their hands and walked out one after another. Lin Yuan was still sitting cross-legged. A cold light flashed in his different-colored eyes. He said calmly, "Since you are here, why didn't you send the secret edict to Li Zhongxing first? Why did you come to this king's side?" Zhang Xiu's pale face appeared in the shadows as if he was drunk. He staggered out of the shadows with a faint smile on his face. He said mockingly, "If I didn't come here, how would I know that our opponent has studied us so thoroughly?" "Your opponent?" Lin Yuan suddenly laughed as if he had heard a joke. He said breathlessly, "You think too highly of yourself, don't you? Don't tell me you think that Lei Qiuxing still thinks you're fine?" Zhang Xiu's face changed slightly. Although it was only for a moment, but that moment of hesitation was still caught by Lin Yuan. When this king had just taken control of the northern frontier, there was still Lei Fan and Hu Yen who could keep me in check. The aristocratic families and sects in the northern frontier were still around. If they wanted to destroy this king, it would be as easy as flipping their hands. In addition, there was no Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce at that time. Even if the Hungduan mountain range wanted to protect me, they would have to give up the northern frontier. However, Lei Qiuxing suppressed his temper. This king could clearly feel his enmity. Therefore, even if you don't say it, this king can guess that Lei Qiuxing definitely wanted to destroy this king and the association of the Demon Emperor. However, at this time, someone whom Lei Qiuxing regarded as his think tank and trusted aide appeared. He suggested to Lei Qiuxing that this king should stay behind to observe the future. He even gave a series of suggestions that seemed like he was thinking of ways to keep the northern frontier in check. In fact, it was purely to let this king understand that Lei Qiuxing would not give up on destroying him. This allowed the northern frontier to grow stronger day after day and become a thorn in Lei Qiuxing's side. "Lord Zhang, are you trying to say that this matter has nothing to do with you?" Lin Yuan tilted his head. His strange eyes fell on Zhang Xiu as if he had seen through everything. "Even if this king believes you, do you think that Lei Qiuxing still hasn't realized it? Blame, no retribution." Suddenly hearing a name that had not been called for many years, a bitter smile appeared on Zhang Xiu's pale face. He reached out to wipe his snot and said with a smile, "It seems like you are really popular. Although my royal uncle has already made up his mind, he is still very picky. It is not easy for you to get him to reveal my identity to you." At this point, Zhang Xiu reached out to grab a chair and sat opposite Lin Yuan. He looked coldly at Lin Yuan and said coldly, "As a chess piece, you should have the awareness of being a chess piece. Since I have chosen you, no matter how unwilling you are, you have to bite the bullet and move forward, even if you will be eaten in the next moment." "Why? Because you are a person who is about to die? Or because of those clowns on the list?" Lin Yuan also looked coldly at Zhang Xiu. The coldness in his eyes was almost tangible. Zhang Xiu originally wanted to sneer twice, but when he heard Lin Yuan mention the name list, the expression on his face suddenly froze. "This king's ability is much greater than you think. Do you think you are still the high and mighty crown prince of the Myriad Swords dynasty who can behead countless people with a single sentence? Even if you were still the crown prince, the difference in status between us is still far greater than you can imagine, let alone the fact that you are just a pitiful slave of a fallen country. You, how dare you? After Lin Yuan took off his mask, Zhang Xiu seemed to have lost his cool and returned to his original arrogant personality. After being provoked by Lin Yuan, he was so angry that he could not even speak. He could only point at Lin Yuan as his face flushed red. Why did you come to the northern frontier? Oh, to deliver a secret decree. Lin Yuan looked mockingly at Zhang Xiu. A black scroll floated behind him. He smiled coldly and said, "What a coincidence. I also received a secret decree from Lei Qiusheng. Are you interested in taking a look?" Chapter 478. You can be considered quite capable. Back then, when over 100 princes of the Wanjian dynasty fought for the throne, you were the only one who had the last laugh. Unfortunately, before you could ascend the throne, Lei Qiusheng launched a coup and seized the throne that belonged to the Zhao clan. Thus, you changed your appearance and clothes, hiding in the Xinwu dynasty with the identity of Zhang Xiu. You actually obtained Lei Qiusheng's trust. At this point, Lin Yuan lightly shook his head and sneered, "Unfortunately, flowers do not bloom for 100 days. The longer you hid by Lei Qiusheng's side, the less he trusted you." And the change in attitude towards the northern frontier and Lei Qiusheng was the real reason why Lei Qiusheng wanted to kill you. Although Lin Yuan did not make any big moves during his hibernation period, he understood many things. The northern frontier was not the strongest enemy that Lei Qiusheng had encountered in his life, but it was definitely the one with the greatest potential. Regarding this hidden danger, not only did Zhang Xiu, who controlled every move of the northern frontier, not advise Lei Qiusheng to eliminate it while it was weak, he instead tried to persuade Lei Qiusheng. This gave the northern frontier time to grow. Now, the northern frontier was too big to be eliminated. If Lei Qiusheng wanted to eliminate this thorn in his flesh, he would have to use the power of the entire country to fight Lin Yuan, and he might not even be able to obtain victory. This was because Zhang Xiu also saw the huge potential of the northern frontier, so he wanted to support the northern frontier to deal with Lei Qiusheng. After all, Lin Yuan was born as a demonic beast, so he was naturally weaker. If Lin Yuan could successfully usurp the country, he could raise his arm and call for the Zhao clan's remaining forces to unite and revive the Wanjian dynasty. Therefore, when the Ether Association infiltrated the northern frontier and tried to help the northern frontier take over Shunning City, it was not only to help Lin Yuan take over the northern frontier, but also to make the Demonic Emperor Association an existence similar to an evil cult in the human order, further weakening Lin Yuan's control and influence over the human forces under his command. However, they did not expect Lin Yuan to find out in advance. Not only did they fail to achieve their goal, but they also made Lin Yuan hate the Zhao clan's remaining forces. Therefore, Zhang Xiu was still one step behind. Although Lin Yuan ruled the northern frontier, in name, the northern frontier belonged to the northern frontier prince's mansion. When Lei Fan was still in office, he directly cut off the connection between the Zhao clan's remaining forces and the demonic beast king's mansion, and cleaned up the dark forces in the northern frontier. Now, even the embroidered uniform guards had to report to Lin Yuan if they wanted to enter the northern frontier, let alone the Zhao clan's remaining forces who were like rats. At this point, Zhang Xiu's plan could be said to have been completely aborted. However, the speed of the northern frontier's growth had far exceeded his imagination. If it were not for Lin Yuan's growing ambition, Lei Qiusheng would not have been able to make up his mind to fight the northern frontier. Instead, he would have officially accepted the northern frontier and let Lin Yuan and the aristocratic families, sects, and nobles slowly exhaust each other before swallowing them all together. After seeing through this, and knowing Zhang Xiu's identity from Lei Qiusheng, Lin Yuan naturally had no scruples when facing Zhang Xiu. The relationship between the chess player and chess piece between the two sides had actually been reversed long ago. It was just that Zhang Xiu, who kept a low profile on the surface but still regarded himself as the legitimate royal family in his heart, was unwilling to admit this point. Zhang Xiu's expression suddenly changed. Although he knew that the fiend emperor of the northern frontier and the embroidered uniform guard were powerful, as the saying went, peers are enemies. As the leader of the embroidered uniform guard, although Zhang Xiu did not look down on his peers from the northern frontier, he did not view them as equals. However, Lin Yuan clearly knew about the conversation he had with Lei Qiusheng before leaving the imperial capital. As his thoughts raced, Zhang Xiu quickly locked onto the group of eunuchs guarding the heart-nurturing palace. However, he was not sure if there was only one or a group of eunuchs. They were all spies under Lin Yuan. Are you surprised? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he teased. As expected, you are not a wise man. You clearly know Lei Qiuxing's current attitude towards this king, but you still do not understand the crux of the matter. In the entire imperial court of the Xinwu dynasty, apart from Lei Qiuxing and you, who doesn't want to tear this king apart? Therefore, when the slightest changes in the imperial court spread to the northern frontier, this king will easily misunderstand Lei Qiuxing's intentions and lose his composure. Following this train of thought, think about how my spies were able to infiltrate Lei Qiuxing's side. It shouldn't be difficult, right? The spies around Lei Qiuxing were personally selected by Lei Qiuxing from the very beginning. Their purpose was to let Lin Yuan know Lei Qiuxing's words and actions, so that he would not lose his composure because of the spontaneous actions of the civil and military officials of the Xinwu dynasty. This was because only Lei Qiuxing's own attitude could determine how long the peace of the northern frontier would last. Zhang Xiu's expression changed several times, but he forced himself to remain calm and said, "You want to deceive me with flowery words? Lin Yuan, don't forget, although I am not a spy, after decades of experience, I am much clearer than you about the intricacies of this matter. Others can maintain their composure when they are flustered, but you, Zhou Wuying, can't even do this, and you still want to pretend to be calm?" Lin Yuan's tone became even more playful as he mocked. "Your attitude towards the northern frontier made Lei Qiuxing suspicious of you, and your attitude towards Lei Qiuxing was even more wrong. Do you think that a mighty ruler like Lei Qiuxing would not be able to see how big of a threat Lei Qiuxing is? He asked for your opinion just to test you. If you protected Lei Qiuxing like you protected the northern frontier, then he would still be dead, but you would be able to survive. It's a pity that you hate the descendants of the Lei family too much, and actually tried to interfere with Lei Qiuxing's decision again. In addition, the Ether Association has been cooperating with the remnants of the Zhou family, and your attitude towards the remnants of the Zhou family seems to be cruel, but in reality, it only scratches the surface. Your identity is also on the verge of being exposed." After pausing for a moment, Lin Yuan then said with a smile, "Of course, your hands are stained with the blood of countless people of the same family. The crown prince of the Wanjian dynasty, who should have lived and died with the country, mysteriously disappeared the night before the imperial capital was breached. Compared to Zhou Xinghai, whose whereabouts are clear, it's as if you have evaporated from the face of the earth. Anyone with half a brain would be able to guess that you have concealed your identity, changed your appearance, and hibernated within the Xinwu dynasty." After Lin Yuan tore off the last bit of concealment, Zhang Xiu's face was cold as he said in a cold voice, "Bullshit dynasty, traitors who kill their masters and usurp the throne. Sooner or later, there will be a day when I will exterminate the entire Lei family. It's a pity that you won't have that chance." Another deep voice sounded. Zhang Xiu's eyelids twitched, subconsciously feeling that this voice was familiar. After a while, Zhang Xiu raised his head in shock. Looking at the calm and unruffled Lin Yuan, he angrily said, "You are King tricking me." As the head of the Secret Service, Zhang Xiu had naturally put in a lot of effort into the course of recognizing people. After all, he could not let others see through him. Therefore, Zhang Xiu quickly associated that deep voice with that terrifying expert who never left Lei Qiuxing's side. Chapter 479. Lin Yuan returned Zhang Xiu's smile and said slowly, "As the head of the Secret Service, you are obviously not qualified. After all, the biggest difference between reasoning and facts is that one is imagination, while the other is evidence. Although my words are harsh, if you refuse to admit that you are innocent, do you think I can casually get rid of an important official of the Xinwu dynasty?" At this point, Lin Yuan raised his head slightly and continued, "It seems that your intelligence-gathering ability is also not up to standard. I originally wanted to cherish talents, but you are indeed not a talent. At best, you are better than an idiot. You can be considered an embroidered pillow." Currently, the northern frontier and the Xinwu dynasty were only one step away from war. Once the two sides started fighting, the barbarians of the Shuangjian dynasty would not care about the attitude of the emperor above. After all, everyone knew that a general would not obey the emperor's orders. Therefore, when there was an opportunity, the barbarians would definitely not let go of the opportunity to loot a burning house. They would directly plunder the central plains of the Shinwu dynasty and the northern frontier without even paying a huge price. Therefore, the attitude of the Shinwu dynasty was actually very important to the northern frontier. Even if the cement was many times stronger than in the previous world, it was impossible to build a great wall that could resist the Shuangjin barbarian overnight. Once the Shenwu dynasty withdrew its main forces from the northern battlefield, Lin Yuan would instantly suffer heavy losses. Therefore, Lin Yuan had no choice but to cooperate with Lei Qiuxing and put on a show to lure Zhang Xiu into confessing. In fact, as long as Zhang Xiu insisted that he was innocent, Lin Yuan could not do anything to him. However, Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuxing had too much information together. Unless Zhang Xiu had already predicted the situation. Otherwise, no matter how strong his psychological defense was, it would be torn apart and he would collapse directly. Bastard, how dare you humiliate me? Zhang Xiu's face flushed red, and he actually pounced forward, clearly intending to kill Lin Yuan. Although Lin Yuan had not fought for a long time, the Black Jiao, who was invincible, was too famous. Therefore, Zhang Xiu went all out the moment he attacked. Obviously, he wanted to take advantage of his surprise attack to kill Lin Yuan. He did not even think about exchanging blows with Lin Yuan. If that happened, he would only be dragged into a war of attrition by Lin Yuan, which was the domain of demonic beasts. Eunuch Tai, although this king agreed to help you investigate, he did not promise to clean up the aftermath. However, Lin Yuan did not evade, and even muttered casually, "As it should be." The deep voice sounded again. As the voice fell, a black shadow swept out from behind Lin Yuan. Although it moved later, it arrived first, and its speed was even faster than Zhang Xiu's. In just 2 breaths of time, the two had already collided, and their palms collided. The black shadow took 3 steps back, revealing a tall and sturdy body. Only his eyes were exposed to the air, and they were as emotionless as the iron mask on his face. He only lowered his head to look at his palm and said indifferently, "A remnant of the previous dynasty, there is no need for the Dragon King to worry about it." The shadow's side was calm, but Zhang Xiu was clearly not feeling so good. He took the palm of the #1 expert of the Shenwu dynasty head-on, and immediately a large amount of blood spurted out. His entire body flew backward, but the force was not reduced at all. He once again landed steadily on the chair that he had personally dragged to the opposite side of Lin Yuan. His face was like a sheet of gold paper, and it was clear that the feeling of taking all of the shadow's force was not good. The 3 people present were all top experts in the same realm. Although Lin Yuan did not interfere, his eyesight was not bad at all. After Zhang Xiu took the shadow's palm, his right hand had already turned into a pile of mush, and he could vaguely see the remnants of his bones in the minced flesh. The muscles of his arm had also exploded, his bones were broken, and his meridians were all broken. Even his internal organs were severely damaged. If there were no elixirs, Zhang Xiu would probably die in another 7 or 8 breaths of time. It was clear that this eunuch Tai, who was a man of few words, was even more terrifying than Lin Yuan had imagined. Just based on the strength that could kill Zhang Xiu with a single palm, it was no wonder that Yan Xingqi would rather waste his time in the northern frontier than go to the imperial capital to seek revenge for his exile. Not counting existences above the Kongming realm, among all the creatures that Lin Yuan had seen, perhaps only the beast Lord Kirin could contend with this eunuch Tai. Another existence that had walked the path of the Kongming realm to the extreme. Unfortunately, he did not have enough opportunities and had never been able to step through that door, nor had he been able to see the true appearance of this world. Farewell. After dealing with Zhang Xiu, this hidden danger, eunuch Tai clearly had no intention of chatting with Lin Yuan. He only cupped his fists towards Lin Yuan, then turned and walked out. Lin Yuan's mind was full of thoughts, but in the end, he still gave up on that tempting idea. At eunuch Tai's level of cultivation, the so-called power and wealth were no longer attractive to him. However, the opportunity to go further was as fatally attractive as a poppy. However, Lin Yuan did not have any cultivation methods above the Kongming realm. Secondly, eunuch Tai was a trusted aide of Lei Qiuxing. Although he did not know the relationship between the two, it was certainly not worse than that of a brother. Would eunuch Tai not admit it after eating it clean? Now that the war was about to start, Lin Yuan did not want to personally create a more powerful enemy for himself. After confirming with the Eye of God that eunuch Tai had left, Lin Yuan let out a long sigh of relief. He walked over to Zhang Xiu, who had closed his eyes and was waiting for death. He straightened his body and said faintly, "I can save you." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Xiu instantly opened his eyes, revealing a glimmer of light in them. Previously, with eunuch Tai watching from the side, it was impossible for Lin Yuan to protect him even if he wanted to. However, now, eunuch Tai was clearly extremely confident in his own abilities. After suppressing Zhang Xiu with one palm, he left him here to wait for death. This gave him a chance of survival. After all, Lin Yuan's name had always been tied to miracles. Since Lin Yuan had spoken, then there must be a way to save him. "But are you willing to be my dog?" In the next moment, Lin Yuan's voice made Zhang Xiu feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. As the crown prince of the Wanjian dynasty, the commander of the embroidered uniform guards and the Ether Association, Zhang Xiu had always been above everyone else. When he heard that Lin Yuan wanted him to be his lackey, Zhang Xiu subconsciously wanted to refuse. However, the pain in his body constantly reminded Zhang Xiu that he had lost everything. Regardless of whether it was the remnants of the Jiao clan that he had used as his foundation, or the embroidered uniform guards and the Ether Association that he had painstakingly built, they had all become clouds of the past. Even he himself was now a person waiting for death. In addition, more than half of the 7 to 8 breaths of time had passed. He could only nod with difficulty. After all, with his status, it was difficult for him to say that he was willing to be someone's dog. Chapter 480. The moment Zhang Xiu nodded, Lin Yuan bit his neck. Before he completely lost consciousness, Zhang Xiu could feel that Lin Yuan had stuffed something into his mouth. There was also a vague sentence, "But I'm not sure what kind of monster you will become." If Zhang Xiu could still open his mouth to speak, he would definitely curse a few words, but after Lin Yuan stuffed something into his mouth and turned it into a medicinal liquid and flowed into his stomach, Zhang Xiu completely lost consciousness and did not even have the chance to curse. About 4 hours passed. Lin Yuan was still sitting on the cushion, staring blankly at Zhang Xiu, who was sitting on the chair. He didn't know if Zhang Xiu was dead or alive. At this moment, Zhang Xiu slowly opened his eyes. What was revealed was not the original pair of black and white eyes, but a pair of dark green vertical pupils that were like gemstones. The skin on the surface of his body was also rapidly changing. The originally pale skin quickly cracked and a large amount of black liquid flowed out from the wounds. After the wounds healed, the original skin had been completely shed. What replaced it was a body of pitch-black scales that were as black as ink. Zhang Xiu looked down at his own changes in a daze. Before he could react in surprise, he saw that his hands had turned into sharp claws covered in ferocious black scales. He opened his mouth to ask what was going on, but only made a series of meaningless hissing sounds. You still retain your rationality. It seems that the transformation was successful, although you still can't escape the fate of becoming a monster. Lin Yuan was not surprised at all. Instead, he looked at Zhang Xiu's current appearance with interest and smiled. Your current appearance is more suitable for your personality. You are more like a poisonous snake than a human. Zhang Xiu held his forehead. Whether it was cursing or crying, it was extremely difficult for him to do. After all, his current body was too unfamiliar to him. Even the simple act of raising his hand to support his forehead took a lot of effort. With a thought from Lin Yuan, Zhang Xiu immediately felt the blood in his body begin to flow and boil, followed by a heart-wrenching pain. Although he did not fall to the ground, even with Zhang Xiu's patience, he could not help but tremble slightly at this moment. This king has granted you a new life and a new body. Naturally, he will not let you do as you wish. This time, consider it a greeting. But remember what this king will say next. What flows in your body is not blood, but the venom of this king. As long as this king wills it, even if we are in 2 different worlds, he can easily take your life. At this point, Lin Yuan's face suddenly revealed a faint smile. He whispered, "In addition, your current appearance is too different from a human's. Take some time to learn how to speak again. This king will have a task for you." However, although this king is not a mediocre master who will kill his subordinates if they make a mistake, he does not have much patience for a poisonous snake like you. You only have one chance to make a mistake, so you can either choose to die together with this king, or you can choose to work for this king honestly. Hiss hiss. Zhang Xiu opened his mouth and let out a few more hisses. A long snake tongue came out of his mouth. Dark green saliva dripped down the snake's head and onto the floor under his feet. Immediately, fist-sized holes were corroded, and white smoke constantly rose from them. Feeling the earth-shaking changes in his body, Zhang Xiu really wanted to cry but had no tears. The reason he was willing to agree to be Lin Yuan's dog was mainly because he still had too many unfinished things to do. He also had a deep obsession with that position. He originally wanted to agree to be Lin Yuan's dog for a period of time and wait until he was fully grown before pulling him out to do it alone. Although he might not succeed, at least he would be more popular than Lin Yuan, who was born a monster. However, Lin Yuan clearly took care of his little thoughts. Not only did he turn him into this inhuman and ghostly appearance, he even put a terrifying restriction on him. Because Zhang Xiu had fallen into a death trap because of a mistake, he had become even more cautious. With the addition of the restriction on his body, Zhang Xiu sadly discovered that he actually no longer had any thoughts of rebelling against Lin Yuan. Glancing at Zhang Xiu, Lin Yuan changed his previous attitude and said in a deep voice, "However, you don't have to feel like you have suffered a great loss. The so-called imperial family is nothing more than the strongest family in the dynasty." What imperial bloodline? It's just a trick to control people's hearts. Whoever believes it is a fool. Moreover, even if I don't interfere, all your plans will proceed smoothly. Do you really think that those so-called officials of the previous dynasty will be willing to assist you, the crown prince of a fallen country? At the mention of this topic, Zhang Xiu suddenly raised his head. His dark green eyes suddenly revealed a fierce glint. Although the remnants of the Jiao family were almost completely uprooted, there were still many officials of the previous dynasty in the Shenwu dynasty. Once these people were gathered together, they would be a force that even Lei Qiusheng would have a headache over. However, Lei Qiusheng did not have a powerful weapon like the Northern Frontier Academy in his hands. He could only absorb talents from various families and sections. Although he had cultivated many poor children, the quality was uneven. They could not do anything important and their official careers were bleak. In addition, these officials of the previous dynasty were originally part of the aristocratic families. Even if Lei Qiusheng wanted to get rid of these officials, he could not do it. After all, he did not want his dynasty to lose control and cause more violent rebellions. Originally, Zhang Xiu could still support the support of these officials of the previous dynasty. However, now that things had turned out like this, who would still admit that he was the crown prince of the Wanjian dynasty? He thought about how he had controlled the embroidered guard for so many years, sheltering these officials from the previous dynasty from the wind and rain. He even did not hesitate to suppress his political enemies for them so that they could support his ascension to the throne. However, with Lin Yuan's interference, all of this had disappeared. How could he not hate him? Look at your unconvinced look. That's why I said that you are just an embroidered pillow. Lin Yuan shook his head helplessly and said with a smile, "Back then, your Jiao family controlled 70% of the country's military power. Lei Qiusheng was able to usurp the throne. Although he did not kill all of you, he still forced you to the bitter cold northern frontier. You had to rely on the support of the monster court to survive. It's fine if you don't admit it. However, the so-called remnants of the Jiao family, other than having a name, are they comparable to any aristocratic family in terms of strength?" This time, Zhang Xiu did not even hiss. He could only remain silent. After all, Lin Yuan was speaking the truth. After tens of years, the influence and power of the Jiao family had been weakened to the extreme, and no one would take the Jiao family seriously anymore, because their power was getting worse day by day, and even some medium-sized families had surpassed the Jiao family in power. Chapter 481. If you knew how to speak, you would refute me at this time. Your Jiao family still has influence. After all, you are the legitimate royal family. As long as you can kill Lei Qiusheng, the traitor, you can win the hearts of the people and rebuild the Wanjian dynasty. As he spoke, Lin Yuan's voice became teasing again. However, Zhang Xiu seemed to not see the teasing in Lin Yuan's voice and nodded seriously. Clearly, from Zhang Xiu's point of view, this was the case. Yes, I admit that once Lei Qiusheng dies, those old officials of the previous dynasty will quickly lift you up and let you, the legitimate crown prince, become the new emperor. But what difference is there between an emperor like that and a puppet? Your Jiao family's strength is weak. So what if you become the emperor? Don't you still need someone to speak up for you so that you can make decisions? If no one speaks up for you, then what? Right now, all the powers in the Shenwu dynasty are against Lei Qiusheng. Because Lei Qiusheng is indulging me now, he wants to learn my methods of reforming the northern frontier and then reform the entire Shenwu dynasty. Therefore, even though they are already against Lei Qiusheng, they still have to obediently listen to his orders. Because Lei Qiusheng holds military power in his hands and has great prestige, as long as he is angry and raises his arm, the Shenwu dynasty, from the generals to the soldiers, will raise their blades against the aristocratic families and sections. Even those nobles who are developing towards aristocratic families will not take the risk of offending Lei Qiusheng and join the aristocratic families. The reason is that the Lei Qiusheng has power that they are afraid of. Just like how this king was able to destroy these aristocratic families and sects because he held an absolute advantage in the northern frontier. If you ascend the throne and don't have the power to make the aristocratic families fear you, those officials will respect you on the surface, but behind your back, they will not take your orders seriously. You can only watch as they do whatever they want. Lin Yuan shook his head and said, according to your original plan, the best result is that you will be a puppet emperor for the rest of your life. Even your sons and grandsons will become puppet-like emperors. In the future, those factions of the previous dynasty will be wiped out by a ruthless person. When all the powers are tied together, it will be the end of your Jiao family. At that time, another existence similar to Lei Qiusheng will be born. Hearing this, Zhang Xiu's eyes showed a hint of contemplation. An emperor without power was a puppet. This was an indisputable fact for all the feudal dynasties. It did not matter if the ones controlling the court were vassals, relatives, civil and military officials, or even eunuchs. There was no difference. Anyone could hold power. But once an emperor became a puppet, unless there was a resurgence and a large number of capable royalists, no one would return power to the emperor. After all, everything that they or their ancestors had done in the past would be brought out and dealt with one by one. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiu regained some of his calmness. His hatred for Lin Yuan was no longer strong. Sensing the change in Zhang Xiu's emotions, Lin Yuan smiled warmly and said, of course, it's still the same as before. The so-called emperor is only the most powerful of the aristocratic families. Now on the northern frontier, the so-called emperor is not even worth mentioning. This is because everyone under the influence of this king has clearly understood two things. The power of the monarchy is bestowed by God, and the king is under the law. If this king is alive, this king has the final say. If this king is dead, the laws of the northern frontier will have the final say. No one is allowed to overstep this. But this king will still allow the aristocratic families to exist. At this point, Zhang Xiu's interest was piqued. Although Lin Yuan had called him an embroidered pillow, Zhang Xiu had been in charge of forces like the Embroidered Guard and the Ether Society for so many years. Even if Zhang Xiu was not outstanding, the experience he had accumulated was enough to make him a one-in-a-million talent. Although the northern frontier already had Sherdong and Luo Su, the two spy masters, Zhang Xiu knew very well that since Lin Yuan had saved him, he would definitely be of use to him. This king can take over the north, but he can't take over the entire Shenwu dynasty. Otherwise, it will definitely lead to the counterattack of the other 6 dynasties. Seeing that Zhang Xiu was in high spirits, Lin Yuan raised his voice and said, so this king needs a name. The former Jiao clan can be used as this king's name. This king can help you with the matter of restoring the Wanjian dynasty. But I think you should know the conditions, right? Zhang Xiu nodded heavily once again. How the king of the northern frontier, who ruled the northern frontier, was now, would be how the emperor of the Wanjian dynasty would be in the future. But since Lin Yuan had put it this way, it was useless even if he did not cooperate. This was because he was not the only Jiao clan. If he was unwilling to do this, there would naturally be others willing to do it. Moreover, it was not without benefits to become Lin Yuan's puppet. For example, the current king of the northern frontier, Li Zhong, was a saintly figure in the eyes of the northern frontier people. Even if Lin Yuan wanted to touch Li Zhong, he would have to think twice. So Zhang Xiu could not be bothered to be pretentious. Instead, he looked at Lin Yuan with a face full of anticipation, waiting for Lin Yuan to paint a picture of the future for him. Of course, this king's subordinates have never been stingy. What should be given will not be given less. As long as you are obedient and do not scheme for things that you should not want, naturally everything is negotiable. Every year, 40% of the income of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce will be given to you in the form of tribute. But this resource cannot be put into the national treasury, but directly into your palace treasury. Lin Yuan looked into Zhang Xiu's eyes and slowly threw out his first bait. As expected, Zhang Xiu's eyes shone brightly. After all, Lin Yuan's actions were equivalent to giving the Jiao clan money and food, allowing the Jiao clan to raise an army and increase the strength of the clan. Perhaps in the future, when the Jiao clan's strength was completely accumulated, they could really sit on the throne of the emperor. But very quickly, a look of worry appeared in Zhang Xiu's eyes. He said vaguely, "Lord Dragon King, it's easy for you to say. But the example of Lei Fan and Hu Yen is still fresh in my mind. This emperor, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to be emperor, right?" Lin Yuan was silent for a moment before he understood the meaning of those words. He laughed coldly and said, "Lei Fan died because he wanted to monopolize power. Hu Yen lost because he stood on the wrong side. As long as you don't cross my bottom line, I will not touch you. If the northern frontier wants to change a new king, I only need to nod my head and the Xinwu dynasty can issue an edict. But if you want to change the emperor, it must be agreed by all the aristocratic families and the people. If you don't give me a reason, I will naturally not touch you." Zhang Xiu nodded slightly, indicating that this was the truth. "All right, this king is tired. Go find Li Zhong and take him to a courtyard to rest. After a period of time, there will be another task for you." Lin Yuan had also lost interest in talking at this moment. He waved his tail expressionlessly. Chapter 482. North of Xinwu Dynasty, under Wei River City. Li Zhongxing was riding on a warhorse with bright red hair. He gazed at the majestic city that was like a nail stuck in the Northern Territory. His eyes blinked slightly, and an indescribable complex expression emerged in his eyes. That was the last city that needed to be taken down to unify the entire North. According to the current progress, he and his southern expedition would arrive at the city in 7 days. If we take down this city, the only ones in the north that have the strength to threaten the northern frontier are those barbaric barbarians. Li Zhongxing's right hand that was holding the sword tightened, and the complex expression in his eyes became more and more intense. Wei River City wasn't a city for people to live in, but a complete fortress camp. Other than the elite soldiers selected from each army, only Shen Lin Jun, who had been trained since childhood, was stationed in the city. Now, Shen Lin Jun's main force in the city was still in the south, and those elite soldiers were also on the expedition. It was estimated that there were at most 300,000 reserve soldiers in the city at this moment. But the funny thing was that Li Zhongxing, who now had more than 10 million soldiers, didn't dare to say that he had more than a 40% chance of winning when facing that isolated island-like majestic city. That was Shen Lin Jun, the most elite army in the entire Xinwu dynasty. It was the face and the trump card of the dynasty. It was a legend that had never lost a battle. Even if they were just reserves, these quasi-warriors of the Divine Forest Army had either cultivated the imperial family's cultivation techniques since they were young or were carefully selected elites from various troops. They were loyal, brave, and never cowered from battle. As the smallest troop in the Xinwu dynasty's army, they enjoyed the best treatment. 70% of the Xinwu dynasty's annual military expenditure was spent on the Divine Forest Army. The supply of phase and the quality of the cultivation techniques was something that even the so-called top aristocratic family's descendants would be jealous of. "Stop looking. That piece of hardbone is not for you to eat." Gao Buzhan, who was wearing silver armor, rode his horse over and stood next to Li Zhongxing. A cold light flashed in his eyes. "We, the Fallen Star Army, never let others take care of our grudges. Your battlefield is further north." Li Zhongxing pursed his lips. It was a taboo to change a commander in battle, so Lin Yuan did not plan to change him at all. Instead, when the sweeping work in the north was coming to an end, apart from the various branches that were still cleaning up the rebel army, he transferred Li Zhongxing and his main forces to the vicinity of Donglin City, ready to strike at the Shuangjian barbarian who was preparing to invade the border at any time. As the most important part of the plan to sweep the north, the battle for Wei River City was directly handed over to Gao Funjin. He planned to let this former champion take the bank of Wei River and establish a military position against the Xinwu dynasty. Although Li Zhongxing had known that this day would come, he had never thought that it would not be the Northern Army that would replace him, but the Fallen Star Army with only 5,000 people. He admitted that the Fallen Star Army was one of the famous strong armies. Even though Gao Fengzhen only had 5,000 people, he had to pay a great price to take them down. However, the Fallen Star Army dozens of years ago was totally different from the Fallen Star Army today. Li Zhongxing would not be surprised if Gao Fengzhen led the Fallen Star Army to fight against Shen Lin Jun decades ago. After all, they were at the same level. But the Fallen Star Army today? 5,000 people were not even enough to fill the gap between Wei River City's teeth. However, he did have the idea of leading the army across the river to the Shenwu dynasty, and the closer he was to the imperial capital, the stronger this idea was. If he were to be the commander of the entire army, he might be the first traitor to change sides at the last minute. Therefore, Li Zhongxing did not feel strange at all about Lin Yuan's decision to transfer him away. In other words, it would be strange if Lin Yuan continued to put him here. Thinking of this, Li Zhongxing came to himself. He moved his lips and said, "General Gao, now all the families and sects in the northern frontier have been wiped out by the Dragon King. Although the northern frontier is important, it doesn't need all the soldiers of the northern army to defend it. Instead of wasting manpower, why don't you and I write a joint letter to remove the soldiers of Shen Lin Jun from the northern army and transfer a troop to help us?" Gao Fengzhen glanced at Li Zhongxing with a touch of surprise in his eyes. He snorted, "The Dragon King has his own plan." While they were talking, a blood-red firework suddenly exploded in the sky in the distance. Li Zhongxing and Gao Fengzhen's faces changed. Li Zhongxing's face turned cold. He gritted his teeth and said, "Crazy." As the red firework with the highest warning priority in the intelligence system of the northern frontier, it was not something that could be set off by just anyone. Besides, the direction of the firework was almost the northernmost part of the northern frontier. Both of them were excellent generals, so they knew that the soldiers of the Shenwu dynasty in the north had opened the defense line and let the Shuangjian barbarian invade the northern territory. Li Zhongxing frowned and thought for a moment. He said with a gloomy face, "I'm afraid it's not that person's idea. It should be that the nobles of the northern frontier use some unknown method to guess that person's intention. They didn't want to see our northern frontier become stronger, so they opened the defense line in advance to let the barbarians come over and disgust us." Gao Fengzhen smiled bitterly. He just waved his hand and said bitterly, "This is just your speculation. But we still have to think of the worst. We can't rule out the possibility that Lei Qiusheng wants to transfer our main force and then send out the reserves in Weha City to wipe out the rebels and the nobles. So this time, I won't accompany you. I'll stay here and watch over Weha City." Li Zhongxing's lips trembled, but he didn't say anything. He just cupped his fist at Gao Fengzhen and rode back to the camp. "It's good to be young." Looking at Li Zhongxing's back, the corners of Gao Fengzhen's mouth rose slightly. As veterans of the Fallen Star Army, they knew very well that Lei Qiusheng, who was sitting on the throne, had taken the same path as the Dragon King of the northern region when he first rose to power. He didn't care about the process or the infamy. As long as he could achieve his goal, he wouldn't even frown even if he had to send all of his trusted subordinates into a battlefield where they couldn't win. Therefore, although Lei Qiusheng was the general with the most victories in the Myriad Swords dynasty back then, his soldiers' elimination rate was also the highest. Letting the Shuangjian barbarian into the northern frontier would indeed hurt Lei Qiusheng's face. It would even cause him to lose a large amount of territory in the northern frontier. It would also be difficult to eliminate the Shuangjian barbarian afterwards. But this was indeed in line with Lei Qiusheng's methods. As long as he could win, nothing else mattered. After all, although the northern frontier now belonged to the Shenwu dynasty in name, the real ruler was Lin Yuan. Even if these Shuangjian barbarians were released, the one who would have a headache was Lin Yuan, not him. Chapter 483. On the other side. In the prince's estate on the northern frontier, Lin Yuan, Li Zhong, Luo Su, Sherdong, and Zhang Xiu sat in the meeting hall, but they were strangely silent. Only a fool would let the barbarians enter the pass now. After all, there's only the Wei River between the north and the south. The place where the barbarians are now is the source of the Wei River. With the strength of the warhorses they ride, they can easily cross the source of the river where the water flows the slowest and head straight for the southern territory of the Shenwu dynasty. It's hard to say who will be cut down by this saber. Zhang Xiu reached out to touch his scaly chin. There seemed to be a ball of fire burning in his eyes. If the embroidered guards' intelligence network in the north was still effective, and if the secret memorials from various places could be accurately delivered to Lei Qiuxing's desk, then even if the old general who nominally controlled nearly half of the country's army was willing, Lei Qiuxing would not agree to such a foolish decision. Thus, regardless of whether Zhang Xiu admitted to this or not, it could only mean one thing: the embroidered guard was gone. We can't rule out another possibility. Shi Dong had changed his attire. His hairstyle was somewhat similar to the Thunder Devil hairstyle Lin Yuan had in his previous life. His hair was tied into small braids, and he was not wearing clothes made of cloth or silk. Instead, he was wearing a leather jacket with wool embroidered on it. He even had a mustache that was almost impossible to tell if it was real or fake. His skin color had also been partially altered, making him look like he was often baptized by the wind and sand on the grasslands. If it were not for the fact that everyone present was familiar with Shi Dong, they would have thought that the Shuangjian barbarian had already charged into the northern frontier. At this moment, Shi Dong was clearly much calmer. He said in a deep voice, "The Xinwu dynasty might have already reached some sort of agreement with the Shuangjian barbarian to have these barbarians point their scimitars at us instead of crossing the Wei River to attack the Xinwu dynasty's southern territory." However, Zhang Xiu shook his head and said, "I don't believe it. Everyone knows that the northern frontier is bitterly cold. Even the entire north is like this." According to the character of those barbarians, once they enter the border, the first thing they do is to go down south and plunder those rich and populous lands, instead of fighting head-on with the northern frontier people, whose folk customs are not inferior to the Frost Mirror herdsmen's. As someone who had been in charge of the Northern Intelligence Agency for many years, Zhang Xiu knew these barbarians very well. On horseback, these barbarians were as vicious and cunning as a pack of ferocious wolves. It could even be said that they had no match for them on flat ground. Other than a few armies that could fight them head-on, the rest of the armies and civilians were like sheep waiting to be slaughtered in their eyes. But at the same time, apart from the wolf-like nature that was engraved in their bones, they could not fight head-on. Once they suffered too many losses, they would be like dogs that were afraid of being beaten. They would shrink back and lick their wounds with their tails between their legs. It was impossible for these barbarians to insist on attacking the north when they knew that it was not easy to provoke them. This was not to say that the barbarians of the Shuangjian dynasty had no guts. After all, a real coward without guts would never become one of the 7 dynasties and train a cavalry that could dominate the world. The reason why the barbarians acted like wolves and hounds was because their country was much more chaotic than the other dynasties. Although they were known as the Shuangjian dynasty, they were still divided into tribes and tribes. Only the leader of the strongest tribe could become the Frost Mirror Khagan, who nominally ruled over all the tribes in the Frost Mirror grassland, similar to the monsters in the Hengduan mountain range. However, even the Frost Mirror Khagan did not have much control over the tribes under his command. At the very least, if the Beast King Kirin gave the order, the entire Hengduan mountain range would enter a period of bloody cleansing. Countless monsters were trembling in fear and did not dare to fight against the Beast King Kirin. However, if the Frost Mirror Khagan disobeyed the will of the tribes under his command too much, the grassland would be thrown into chaos. By then, all the tribes would be slaughtered until a new Khagan was elected. The cattle and sheep of the loser would become the spoils of war, the wives and daughters of the loser would become the playthings of others, the young would become slaves, and the old would be slaughtered. Even the powerful Frost Mirror Khagan would be eaten by the wolves when he was weakened. Under such circumstances, even the bravest warrior would think twice about losing too much of his strength. Would the tribe he was from become the prey of other tribes? In terms of fighting strength and bravery, the cavalry of the Shuangjian dynasty was the best in the world. However, in such a decentralized system, they had become a constraint to themselves. Therefore, even though the other 6 dynasties were not as strong as the Shuangjian dynasty in terms of national strength, they could still scornfully call them barbarians. Then let's make these barbarians believe that the northern frontier is now richer than the south, and that the army of the northern frontier is far inferior to the elite warriors of the Xinwu dynasty. As long as we can fulfill these 2 requirements, the barbarians, who are used to bullying the weak and fearing the strong, will treat the north as a delicious lamb and eagerly come to eat us. Shi Dong spoke once again in a powerful and resonant voice. He was originally ordered to go into hiding in the Shuangjian dynasty. However, before he could set off, the barbarians had already invaded the north. This forced him to give up on his plan, and order the members of the Association of the Demon Emperor hiding in the Shuangjian dynasty to go into hibernation. However, Shi Dong had done the preparatory work perfectly. Even compared to Zhang Xiu, a veteran spy, Shi Dong could say that he understood the Shuangjian barbarian better. After all, he was prepared to take the risk and carry out the undercover work himself. He was completely different from Zhang Xiu, who was passively defending. Therefore, his intelligence work was more comprehensive and accurate. How is that possible? Zhang Xiu's green eyes fell on Shi Dong's face. He sneered and said, "Don't tell me you're saying that the Shuangjian dynasty has also established an intelligence agency similar to ours. That's why they know the northern frontier like the back of their hand? If the barbarians had such brains, the Frost Mirror grassland wouldn't be in such a situation. The barbarians indeed can't establish an intelligence agency. If they really have one, it would save us a lot of trouble. Everyone knows that our northern frontier is currently preparing our troops and eyeing the Shenwu dynasty's southern territories covetously. Look at the Shenwu dynasty's side. They are in a quagmire of war. Their troops have suffered heavy losses and have no way to replenish them. If they can't come up with a solution, they won't even be able to pay the officials next year, let alone the soldiers." Li Zhong rolled up his sleeves and said with a gloomy face, "The barbarians know very well that the northern frontier is prosperous because our Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce is also doing business in their territory. Although there aren't many tribes that are cooperating with us, those tribes are living a much better life. Given the barbarians' character, they will naturally think that as long as they can rob the northern frontier, they will be able to solve the problem once and for all. They won't need to pay a large number of livestock or feis to take the goods in our hands." Chapter 484. I admit that this makes sense, but how do you explain who's the pushover and who's the tough nut to crack? Zhang Xiu panted heavily. It was obvious that he had lost his mind. In the past, even Lei Qiusheng had to listen to his advice. But now that he had joined the northern frontier, not only did he no longer have the Embroidered Guard or the Ether Association to help him, even Shi Dong and Luo Su, who he used to look down on, could now argue with him face to face. Under such a huge disparity, even the most talented person would lose their mind for a moment, let alone Zhang Xiu, who had been called an embroidered pillow by Lin Yuan. Therefore, after Li Zhong also stood on Shi Dong's side, Zhang Xiu's mentality had completely lost its balance. He instinctively thought that the old subordinates of the northern frontier were rejecting him, an outsider, and worried that he would take away power from the Embroidered Guard and the Shifter Emperor Association. "Isn't that even simpler?" Li Zhong sneered and said indifferently, "What are your old subordinates doing? I don't believe that after such a long time, the current troop deployment of our northern frontier and southern expedition, as well as the map of the territory defenses, have not been sent to Frost Khan. At the same time, they only need to blur the troop deployment and the state of the Shenwu dynasty's treasury, and they'll naturally make the barbarians think that we're pushovers." At this point, Li Zhong slowly stood up from his seat and said in a strange tone, "After all, it's the Shenwu dynasty's troops that have blocked the barbarians outside the northern pass for such a long time, not our northern frontier's troops. What if Lei Qiusheng promises the barbarians that as long as the barbarians return the territory that was taken from them, he will give the north to the barbarians as a racetrack?" Zhang Xiu was speechless. Although he still wanted to struggle, he also realized something. Lin Yuan, the true ruler of the northern frontier, had not spoken yet. Even if they said everything, it would be useless. When Lin Yuan made his own decision, they could only follow it unconditionally. Therefore, if he objected now for the sake of objecting, it would only lower his evaluation of himself in Lin Yuan's heart, and his position in the future would also be lower. "That's not very likely." Luo Su, who had also remained silent, rubbed his face with his bandaged hands and said coldly, "The Hengduan mountain range is vast, but there are also many monster tribes living there. In addition, most of the monsters have strong reproductive abilities and short growth cycles, so it's impossible to raise all the monsters in this area. Every year, there will be a lot of monster hordes. However, with Lord Dragon King in charge of the northern frontier, the monster hordes that were supposed to attack us have been diverted to other directions. This is why the northern frontier seems to be safe now." Here, Luo Su paused and smiled. No matter how stupid that Frost Mirror Khan is, to be able to become the Wolf King, he must be either the strongest or the smartest of the pack. He must have realized that conquering the north of the Shenwu dynasty can still be as comforting as we are in the northern frontier. This is equivalent to helping Lei Qiusheng protect the rich south, and also helping them to block the monsters in the Hungduan mountain range. Fighting on two fronts for a long time will only weaken them while the Xinwu dynasty grows stronger. When the time comes, not only will the Shuangjin dynasty not get any benefits, but their own territory will also be devoured and they will become the watchdogs of the Xinwu dynasty. Luo Su did not choose a side. Instead, he stood in a relatively fair position and expressed his opinion. So, however, Li Zhong frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "The barbarians of the Reflection Frost dynasty don't want to exterminate us. Instead, they want us to become like crops in their fields. Every year, they'll come and plunder us, but they want us to continue developing? This is the wisdom of the Wolf King." Luo Su nodded slightly and sneered, "Lei Qiuxing can't wait for the Shuangjin dynasty to conquer the north, but Frost Mirror Khan won't agree. This war is inevitable, but we won't lose from the beginning. Because even if we lose, we will only suffer losses, but we won't perish because of this. Even if Lei Qiuxing interrogates us, the Shuangjin barbarian will most likely stand on our side and send troops to attack the Xinwu dynasty's borders. They will become our protectors." Li Zhong pondered for a moment. Finally, the tangled mess in his mind was completely unraveled. He sneered, "How can there be such a good thing?" With Li Zhong's wisdom, he had figured out the cause and effect. The Xinwu dynasty wanted to use the barbarians to destroy them. Even if they couldn't, they wanted to hit them as hard as possible and make the northern frontier weaker than the south. However, Frost Mirror Khan was obviously not a brute. Not only did he not want to fall into Lei Qiuxing's trap, but he also wanted to take advantage of Lei Qiuxing and take control of the northern frontier, which nominally belonged to the Xinwu dynasty. However, no matter what the two emperors were scheming, the northern region seemed to be the weaker party in their eyes. They deserved to be schemed against and even eaten into their stomachs. From the beginning to the end, the two emperors had never taken the northern region seriously. They thought that the northern region was only qualified to be eaten alive. Although Li Zhong was not the actual ruler of the northern frontier, as the king of the northern frontier, Li Zhong still had his dignity. Moreover, Li Zhong himself was a talented national scholar. Although the northern frontier was not as strong as the Xinwu dynasty, there was no mess to clean up. All in all, they were on par with each other. If Lei Qiuxing still took control of the northern frontier, he would probably go back and hang himself with a white silk. Indeed, it's not that easy. Finally, Lin Yuan, who had been silent with his eyes closed, opened his mouth. Only then did everyone realize that the Black Water Dragon King had been listening to their opinions instead of sleeping on the soft cushion. "According to the original plan, we'll leave the barbarians alone. We'll let them win all the way, but don't let them taste the sweetness. We'll even let them think that the northern frontier is really weak and easy to bully. We'll whet their appetite and let them go deep into the hinterland of the northern frontier. Then, we'll let Li Zhongxing send out the main forces to eat up all the barbarians who dare to step into our territory." Lin Yuan opened his different-colored eyes and glanced coldly at Luo Su. He said in a cold voice, "Mobilize your imperial guard. If more than 2,000 barbarians escape, you and Li Zhongxing can just wait to die." "Yes." Luo Su stood up, cupped his fists at Lin Yuan, and strode out of the meeting hall. As someone who treated Lin Yuan as a life-saving medicine, Luo Su could clearly feel Lin Yuan's will. This Dragon King, who had dealt with all changes by sticking to the status quo and only set out for war when everything was ready. Moreover, he wanted to eat up the entire north in one go, was really angry this time. Chapter 485. "And you, Sherdong." Lin Yuan's gaze shifted again, his killing intent raging as he coldly said, "Tell those little bastards under you that after the main forces of the barbarians are defeated, it will be your turn to reap the fruits of the battle. If you can't wipe out those defeated and deserters, you'll have a taste of your own medicine. This king won't take your life or disband the association of the Demon Emperor, but don't even think about messing with Luo Su in the future. Just be his lackey." "Yes, sir." Sherdong shuddered, and his expression suddenly became serious. As an official in the prosperous northern frontier, even the most strong-willed person would inevitably make mistakes. Even if they didn't dare to touch the fat meat that belonged to His Excellency the Dragon King, it wouldn't be a problem for them to suck the oil off their hands. However, these were things that could be used against them, and they were in the hands of the embroidered uniform guards and the Association of the Demon Emperor. Therefore, once Sherdong and Luo Su fell out, these northern frontier officials would have no choice but to take sides and express their support. When the time came, both sides would throw out the dirty information in their hands, and it was hard to say how many people in the northern frontier would lose their heads. During this period of time, he had been fighting openly and covertly with Luo Su. For example, in order to monopolize the credit for suppressing the aristocratic families, he couldn't even share the information in his hands with Luo Su. This caused Luo Su to resort to many dirty and underhanded methods, causing the reputation of the embroidered uniform guards to worsen. Although it was to his liking, this Dragon King was clearly unhappy. Li Zhong. After Sherdong also bid farewell and left, Lin Yuan's gaze fell on Li Zhong. Yes, sir. Li Zhong quickly lowered his head, not daring to look Lin Yuan in the eye. This was because he suddenly realized he had made a huge mistake. Although this mistake was something to be happy about for most rulers, it was clearly impossible for such a good opportunity to fall from the sky. However, because of the matter with the barbarians, he had neglected the great situation on the battlefield and ruined the arrangements Lin Yuan had painstakingly made. Whether there would be another such opportunity in the future was not even up to Lin Yuan and him to decide. This king scrammed to the side and faced the wall. This king finds you an eyesore. As expected, after Li Zhong agreed, Lin Yuan's roar suddenly sounded. Li Zhong shrunk his neck and obediently walked to the wall. After the evil fire in his heart had mostly dissipated, Lin Yuan cast his gaze on Zhang Xiu's face that was covered in black scales. Zhang Xiu also stood up straight and looked at Lin Yuan with a face full of anticipation. After all, he was a newly surrendered general who had just joined Lin Yuan's side. He did not have any contributions to the northern frontier. Moreover, the small actions he had taken to protect the development of the northern frontier were firstly for his own selfish reasons, and secondly, it was not convenient to talk about them. Therefore, Zhang Xiu believed that as long as he became one of the meritorious officials of the northern frontier, he could at least guarantee his future position, even if these old subordinates did not reject him. Go look for Gao Buzhan. He will arrange for you to go to the south. Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes overflowed with a cold light as he said in an incomparably ruthless manner, "Since that old thing Lei Qiuxing dared to do such a thing, then no wonder this king wants to do the same. I believe that with your understanding of the South, you can better arrange for those evil cultists and know where to use them to cause the greatest damage." Evil. Yes. Zhang Xiu's expression changed slightly, and he almost cursed out loud, but he quickly adjusted his posture. What kind of monsters were these two people that he had been serving ever since he had hidden his identity? One did not hesitate to sacrifice his territory in the north and his own face to brazenly lead the barbarians of the Shuangjian dynasty to invade. The other made corresponding arrangements in the south, preparing to lead the evil cultists who had been expelled to the isolated islands overseas with great difficulty back to the mainland. After all, although the north was vast, it was mostly mountainous, and there were not many places suitable for horses to run and raise. Even if the barbarians took over the north, when they realized that this meat was of little value, they would naturally withdraw from the north. At that time, whether or not they could retreat unscathed would depend on the recovery of the Shenwu dynasty. But those evil cultists? They were like weeds. As the saying went, even if a wildfire could not burn them out, they would grow again when the wind blew. Once this group of evil cultists entered a densely populated area, they would be like fish in water. In less than half a month, they could turn a group of simple and honest people into murderers who would sacrifice themselves for those unknown evil gods. When that time came, the South would inevitably be even more chaotic than it was now. There might not even be a way to uproot these evil cultists even until death. After all, although the previous expulsion of the evil cultists seemed to have gone smoothly, the various forces had secretly prepared for hundreds of years in order to succeed. This was nothing more than inviting trouble to oneself. However, Zhang Xiu did not know whether Lei Qiuxing had the ability to completely wipe out the cultists. At this time, it was not good to say much. He could only swallow this bitter fruit. After all, Lin Yuan was right. This was the result of Lei Qiuxing's actions. As long as the barbarians of the Shuangjian dynasty did not enter the territory of the north, the evil cultists of the south would not strike. Both sides had placed a time bomb beside each other, but no one knew when this time bomb would detonate. Therefore, they could only remain in a stalemate and wait for both sides to be ready to fight. Zhang Xiu was very clear that no matter how well he did this task, he was destined to leave behind a bad name in the future. Obviously, this Black Water Dragon King was not a magnanimous person. Previously, when the remnants of the Jiao clan pretended to be members of the Association of the Demon Emperor and wanted to conquer Shunning City for the demon beasts, it was to nail the Association of the Demon Emperor to the pillar of shame. Now that Lin Yuan asked him to be in charge of the evil cultists, it was tantamount to nailing him to the pillar of shame. In the future, no matter what attitude Zhang Xiu had towards Lin Yuan would always be able to grab hold of his weakness. Once this scandal was exposed, not to mention restoring the Myriad Swords dynasty, even the remnants of the Jiao clan who had successfully restored their country would not be able to tolerate him. Although Zhang Xiu had accepted the task, he was still standing in the same place. Lin Yuan moved his body, his head almost touching Zhang Xiu's face, and said coldly, "Why? Are you not willing to do this task?" Lin Yuan's voice exploded in his ears like spring thunder. Only then did Zhang Xiu wake up from his inner struggle. He could only clasp his fists at Lin Yuan awkwardly, and then quickly leave the meeting hall. So be it if you want to be a dog. In any case, he had already become like this, neither human nor ghost. Why would he care so much? If he did not complete Lin Yuan's task well, he naturally did not need to think about what would happen to him in the future, because he would not have a future. After everyone left, Li Zhong trembled and turned his head to look at Lin Yuan with an extremely ugly expression. Chapter 486. Do you think you are very humorous? Lin Yuan glanced at the trembling Li Zhong and narrowed his eyes. He said coldly, "This king created an opportunity for you, but you chose to stand on Sherdong's side? Do you really want Zhang Xiu to think that you old subordinates of the northern frontier are suppressing him? I really didn't realize it before, but after thinking it through, I still believe that I did the right thing." Li Zhong was stunned for a moment before he slowly said, "However, Zhang Xiu is a very wild person. If we don't suppress him, he will definitely think that he can sit back and enjoy the northern frontier. However, if I cooperate with Sherdong to expose this matter, Zhang Xiu will definitely feel a sense of danger. As such, no matter what mission the Dragon King gives him, he can only do his best to complete it. Otherwise, according to his habitual thinking, he will probably think that we old people of the northern frontier will not give him a place to stay. However, if you use a gentler method, you can still achieve your goal. You can even make Zhang Xiu feel grateful to you." Lin Yuan's eyes were still narrowed as he slowly said, "You must know that a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. The embroidered uniform guard is far more powerful than the Association of the Demon Emperor and the embroidered uniform guard that we temporarily established. In a mere northern frontier, we naturally have the advantage. However, after leaving the northern frontier, they don't have much of a chance of winning against the embroidered uniform guard." Lin Yuan paused. Even if the embroidered uniform guard has changed masters, with Zhang Xiu's personality, he will definitely have a backup plan. At the very least, the people he placed in the northern frontier before his identity was exposed are absolutely loyal to him. These people are the backup plan he left for himself. Even a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows, let alone a venomous snake like Zhang Xiu. No matter how Zhang Xiu performed in front of Lin Yuan, no one would lower their guard against him, even if he was just an embroidered pillow. After all, this guy had great willpower and ambition to change his appearance and hide by Lei Qiuxing's side. He was even able to contend with Lei Qiuxing for such a long time and obtain such great authority. This was enough to make many so-called ambitious people blush with shame. Even though Lin Yuan was used to being in a superior position, he still didn't have the confidence to control Zhang Xiu. Therefore, when he fed him the dragonization root, he also injected his own curse poison into Zhang Xiu's body to restrict him. If Zhang Xiu and his lackeys could become Li Zhong's support, they would be the third spy force between the Council of the Demon Emperor and the embroidered uniform guards. The triangle was the most stable. When the time came, the 3 sides would suppress and balance each other. Only then would Li Zhong, who was sitting on the throne of the northern frontier, be stable. He wouldn't be directly pushed down from the throne of the northern frontier by Sherdong and Luo Su's combined efforts. However, Li Zhong had missed the opportunity to be gentle with Zhang Xiu. He was even secretly standing on the opposite side of Zhang Xiu. This was the reason why Lin Yuan was so angry. Li Zhong shook his head disapprovingly and said with a smile, "Dragon King's foresight is something your student can't match. However, the Dragon King is too kind to the people around him. This is a great weakness. Dragon King wishes for me to be benevolent and virtuous. But have you considered your own situation? There are no two suns in the sky. Your student uses benevolence to win people's hearts. The Dragon King uses martial prowess to deter the world. It sounds like a good idea, but has the Dragon King considered how we should interact in the future? When your student's wings are fully grown, even if your student is willing to bow down to you, those people under your banner will not agree." Lin Yuan was silent. He didn't know how to refute Li Zhong. In this life, he was born as a demonic beast. To him, this was his greatest weakness. As long as the humans and demonic beasts in the Sky Martial Continent didn't make peace and share the world, then Lin Yuan could only be the king behind the scenes. Lei Fan, Hu Yan, Li Zhong, they were all faces that Lin Yuan had nurtured in this sick environment. However, the greatest drawback of doing this was time. Even if he was a puppet, after being in this position for a long time, he would become the true king in the hearts of others. When his wings were fully grown, there would definitely be a battle between the two sides. It was just that the time of the battle would be sooner or later. Unless by that time, Lin Yuan had already unified the Sky Martial Continent and solved the problem of the Heaven's Gate. Otherwise, it would always be a tragedy where those close to him would feel pain and those close to him would feel joy. Let's talk about Zhang Xiu again. Li Zhong's expression turned solemn and changed from his previous trembling appearance. He gritted his teeth and said, "He is a poisonous snake. In terms of conciliation, I don't think anyone has done a better job than Lei Qiusheng. He promoted him from a lowly position and treated him as a trusted aide. He gave him the control of the embroidered uniform guards and the Ether Society, which were in the shadows but could affect the entire empire. However, what was the result? Has Zhang Xiu ever been loyal to Lei Qiusheng?" Li Zhong gently shook his head and sneered. "The best way to deal with this kind of poisonous snake is to suppress it, push it aside, and let it live in eternal fear. Let it feel that it will lose everything if it makes a small mistake. This way, Zhang Xiu can be of help to us instead of nurturing a tiger that will only invite calamity." Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. Then, he slowly opened his eyes and said helplessly, "All right, you've convinced me. Go about your business." When he finished speaking, Lin Yuan's figure had already faded and disappeared from the meeting hall. It was only at this moment that a thin layer of cold sweat appeared on Li Zhong's forehead. The corners of his mouth trembled slightly and he squeezed out a bitter smile. When working by the side of the Dragon King, he had to always remember the saying, "Being by the side of the Emperor is like being by the side of a tiger." An opportunity or a problem could be a test given by the Dragon King. If he passed the test, everything would be fine. However, if he went against the intentions of the Dragon King, Lei Fan and Hu Yan were bloody precedents. Although Li Zhong did not know whether Zhang Xiu's matter was an opportunity or a test for him, his rationality reminded him that if he wanted to live a long life as the king of the northern frontier, he should never stand in the way of Lin Yuan. He should not have any thoughts that he should not have. As for the nonsense of replacing him, it was all because of his greed. Once he took that step, no matter how intelligent he was, he would not have a good ending. Therefore, from the initial mistake to the subsequent determination, Li Zhong had always maintained a certain attitude, to reject Zhang Xiu's participation. Luo Su and Shi Dong could become partners, but Zhang Xiu could not. This poisonous snake's ambition was too great. Even if he became a role like the king of the northern frontier and obtained enough authority, he would still not understand what it meant to be content. He would not accept the existence of a retired emperor above him. When the time was right, he would overestimate himself and challenge Lin Yuan's authority. Then he would be smashed into pieces. Being associated with such a person, even if he did not participate in some matters, the best outcome would be to be implicated. Chapter 487. North of the Shenwu Dynasty. Donglin City. Li Zhongxing was dressed in golden armor and had a scarlet cloak draped over his back. He stepped on the city wall with one foot and looked at the frost mirror cavalry that roared past like tigers and wolves. Cold sweat slowly seeped out of his forehead. These Shuangjian barbarian soldiers had changed their previous style of destroying everything they passed by and marched uniformly toward the northern frontier. It was as if Donglin City and other cities that still belonged to the Shenwu dynasty did not exist. They did not even pretend to attack. They even took a detour around the almost defenseless farms and villages outside the city. Seeing this scene, Li Zhongxing's hope for that man was once again shattered. The Shuangjian barbarian soldiers' style of action was obviously because they had reached an agreement with some people from the Shenwu dynasty. Their only goal this time was the northern frontier. Although that person was trying his best to protect the cities and people in the north, he did not seem to know that the Shuangjian barbarian soldiers loved to repeat their actions and did not hesitate to push the entire north into a pit of fire. After struggling for a while, he finally sighed faintly and said in a clear voice, "The craftsmen and materials prepared by your highness have already entered Donglin City, right?"
Yes.
Although we're not sure when the barbarians will come, it's better to be prepared than to be suddenly attacked. When the higher-ups made the decision, they had already put it into action. 60% of the craftsmen and all the materials have now been transported to Donglin City and the nearby cities. Although the number of craftsmen did not meet the requirements, we can still complete the project on time by putting some of our soldiers into the construction of the Great Wall project. Standing next to Li Zhongxing was a middle-aged warlord who was as burly as a bear. He was also dressed in golden armor, but there was more worry in his eyes than Li Zhongxing's. Obviously, he had not been baptized by the flames of war and was very nervous in the face of such a battle. "Pa, pa." Li Zhongxing gently patted the general's shoulder and said with a chuckle, "There's nothing to be nervous about. Don't be fooled by how arrogant these barbarians are now. Once our plan is carried out step by step, they'll have to leave all their men and horses behind in the north. Are you afraid of a group of people who are about to die?" He remembered the middle-aged general's name, Qiao Yu. Although his surname was Qiao, he had nothing to do with the Qiao family of the northern frontier. He was a true civilian of the northern frontier, and his ancestors had all been honest farmers for 10 generations. Although he was fortunate enough to be selected as one of the first students of the Northern Frontier Academy, Li Zhongxing had been a lecturer at the Northern Frontier Academy for 2 days, so he had a deep impression of this ridiculously sturdy fellow. However, they encountered such a large-scale war before they even graduated. It even involved 2 dynasties. Nobody knew if it was a blessing or a curse for the first batch of students. Just then, a white carrier pigeon descended from the sky and landed accurately on Li Zhongxing's shoulder. Li Zhongxing first took off a small cloth bag from his waist and fed the carrier pigeon a piece of jerky. Then, he reached out to take off the small wooden bucket tied to the carrier pigeon's leg, removed the cork, and poured out the letter inside. After glancing at the numbers on the letter, his face turned gloomier. According to the information sent back by the members of the Association of the Demon Emperor from the front lines, there were as many as 500,000 barbarians invading the north this time. It was said that Shuang Jianhan's 13th son had entered the northern frontier some time ago and lost contact with the Shuangjian dynasty's army. Therefore, Shuang Jianhan had even sent out 3 Blood Liao Knights to join this expedition, saying that they would find his son even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground. In addition to the barbarians who had entered the northern territory, there were also 700,000 barbarian soldiers who had crossed the Wei River from the source where the river flowed gently. They were now heading straight for the central plains of the Shenwu dynasty. Although these barbarians had verbally reached an agreement with the Shenwu dynasty, they obviously had no intention of letting go of the rich south after entering the pass. Li Zhongxing pondered for a moment before taking a pen and paper from a guard and writing, "The barbarians' movements are of utmost importance. You must send someone to follow the barbarian cavalry and report the situation every 30 minutes. If there is no response after 30 minutes, you will consider them as having died in battle. Send someone else to follow the barbarian cavalry." Of course, Li Zhongxing also used code words. Although the birds that sent the letter were all demonic beasts, there was no lack of people with high cultivation among the barbarians. Moreover, one had to be skilled in archery and riding to make a living on the grassland. These birds were very easy to kill by the barbarians. Using code words to communicate was also to prevent the information from leaking out. He threw the order back into the small wooden bucket and tied it to the carrier pigeon's leg. With a light shake of his shoulder, the carrier pigeon suddenly flew into the sky. Li Zhongxing measured the situation on the city wall for a moment, then pointed to the west and said in a deep voice, "Although these barbarians won't act until they see the hare, It'll be difficult for them to continue chasing if they don't get any benefits. We have to stimulate their courage. As soon as he finished speaking, Qiao Yu, who was beside him, took a deep breath and growled, "Marshal Li, the troops in Donglin City are ready. As soon as you give the order, we'll take a shortcut and run in front of the barbarians. We'll *King ambush them first." Smack. Li Zhongxing patted Qiao Yu's head again and said angrily, "Big Black Bear, when will you grow some brains? What are our identities now? We're the generals guarding the city of the Shenwu dynasty. If we run to the front and ambush these barbarians, won't we ruin the Dragon King's plans if they come around and stop chasing us?" Then? Qiao Yu's face froze, and he asked carefully. Li Zhongxing shook the scarlet cape behind him and sneered, "We'll go out and scout. We'll wipe out small groups of barbarians when we encounter them. After making sure that there are no barbarian cavalry nearby, we'll let the craftsmen and brothers come out to work. A bunch of ignorant fools. Do you think you can escape unscathed after entering my territory?" Li Zhongxing had seen the horror of cement with his own eyes. A bag of powder-like substance was turned into moldable paste with water. After being molded and air-dried for about 10 minutes, it immediately became a hard stone that was invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire. With the craftsmanship of the current northern frontier, even an all-out attack from an airborne realm cultivator with infinite strength would only leave a shallow mark on the cement wall. With this divine item in hand, Li Zhongxing was confident that he could build a high wall that would make the barbarians despair at first sight within 5 days as long as no one interfered. Qiao Yu scratched his head in confusion and said, "But isn't this our job to begin with? Marshal Li, you said that we need to stimulate the courage of these barbarians. Do you think we'll just let them ride on their horses like this?" Chapter 488. That's not our job. Li Zhongxing's eagle-like eyes narrowed slightly as he sneered. "Don't forget that we're the Southern Expedition Army. At most, we're only responsible for annihilating the defeated barbarians. If we stand out too much, what will our brothers do? Freeloaders?" Qiao Yu's brain, which had grown muscles, turned quickly for a while before he exclaimed, "Commander Li, are you saying, other than them, who else is qualified to fight against the barbarian cavalry in the wild?" Li Zhongxing laughed self-mockingly and said sourly, "Other than the 5,000 Fallen Star Army, the Southern Expedition and the Northern Battlefront Army might be famous, but if we were to fight against the barbarian cavalry in the wild, we would only have a slim chance of survival. The Northern Frontier used to be so proud and arrogant. They didn't even bother to build the perfect fortifications in the 7 border cities that the Shenwu dynasty had built for many years. Instead, they directly tore down the city walls and divided the settlements. First of all, the demon beasts in the Hengduan Mountains could come out at any time and wipe out all the armed forces that didn't obey Lin Yuan. Second of all, it was because Lin Yuan had never taken the heavy infantry army of the Shenwu dynasty seriously. Although the heavy infantry army of the Shenwu dynasty was no weaker than the Frost Mirror cavalry, they were much more mobile. Once the two sides clashed, the Frost Mirror cavalry might not even be able to shake the formation of the Shenwu dynasty's heavy infantry army. But the Shenwu dynasty's heavy infantry army could quickly bypass the Shenwu dynasty's heavy infantry army and attack other troops. Even if they couldn't find the weakness of the Shenwu dynasty's heavy infantry army, they could easily leave the Shenwu dynasty's heavy infantry army behind and attack other cities. It was not that the northern frontier was afraid of the Frost Mirror cavalry in a head-on battle. It was just that the territory of the northern frontier was too vast. If they didn't fortify the city walls, they couldn't defend against the Frost Mirror cavalry's attacks. Therefore, they had to use Donglin City as the center and connect the nearby cities to form a strong pass without any natural barriers. This was the biggest investment in history. Everyone knew that the northern frontier was very cold, but few people knew that the amount of resources the Shenwu dynasty invested in the defense of the 7 border cities every year was enough to stun the aristocratic families in the south who fought each other for a sea trade route. In other words, if Lei Qiuxing hadn't combined the memories of his previous life to come up with a substitute for cement in this life, even if Lin Yuan owned a gold-swallowing beast called the Chamber of Commerce of the northern region, he wouldn't have been able to afford such a terrifying expense. Otherwise, Lei Qiuxing wouldn't have used the barbarians of the Mirror Frost dynasty as a killing move against Lin Yuan's weak spot. It was just that this stab was too fast and too sudden. If it weren't for the fact that the northern region was now full of heroes and had realized this early on, the Mirror Frost dynasty and the Shenwu dynasty might have succeeded. On the other side, Xiao En, who was wearing a brown warrior's robe, was squatting on the trunk of a giant tree. He narrowed his eyes and put an arrow made of crimson steel mastiff's bones on the bowstring. He slowly pulled the bowstring and adjusted his breathing. His voice echoed in the forest like the wind. Ready. Fire. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Thousands of sharp arrows suddenly flew out from the dense forest, like a black cloud surging out. Before the cavalry of Frost Mirror who were approaching from afar could react, the group of people at the front had been shot into sieves and fell into pools of blood. Don't panic. Don't panic. A general of Frost Mirror pulled on the reins and glanced at the casualties. He said fiercely, there aren't many of them, only about 2,000 or 3,000. Rush over and eat them. Tell these bastards what's the matter. Warriors of the grasslands. All Kiliarchs, move forward in a roundabout way. Archers, take out your bows and suppress the enemy. This general was obviously a veteran of the battlefield. With just a cursory glance at the casualties, he was able to deduce the number of archers who had suddenly launched an attack on them. However, before the experienced general could finish his sentence, another black cloud surged out of the forest and shot down another 300 Frost Mirror cavalrymen. There were even a few unlucky Blood Liao cavalrymen among them. Many of them were terrified by this sudden turn of events. The tribe that Frost Mirror Khan belonged to was the Shuel Yao tribe. Therefore, this extravagant cavalry was like the personal guards of the Frost Mirror royal family. Whether it was food, clothing or armor, they were far superior to the other troops of the Shuangjian dynasty. If it were them, their bows and arrows might not be able to penetrate the armor of the Shuel Yao knights. Unless they were lucky enough to hit an exposed part of the armor, such as the face, the number of arrows would not be enough to cause any effective damage. But look at the arrows that were shot out. The arrows would instantly pierce through the leather armor of ordinary cavalry. The arrows would also instantly pierce through the secret metal armor of the Shuel Yao knights. The armor of their warriors was like a piece of paper, without any defensive ability at all. It was as if they were wrapped in a layer of paper. The general gritted his teeth and roared, "Brothers, if you're scared now and turn around to run, you'll still be shot for nothing. Who knows who will be the next unlucky ones to die? Draw your bows and return fire." We have 70 to 80,000 people on this road. Do you think we'll be scared away by a few thousand soldiers? Cover fire. Let the brothers of the assault cavalry charge in and kill these bastards. As soon as the general finished speaking, the Frost Mirror cavalrymen were somewhat reluctant, but they still quickly drew their bows and arrows. Feeling the wind around them, they aimed at the dense forest in front of them. Every one of them looked particularly ferocious as they gritted their teeth. After all, living on the cruel grassland, even a gust of cold wind could freeze people to death. If one's clothes were not tightly wrapped enough, it was not uncommon for parts of one's body to freeze off. Therefore, the Frost Mirror tribe rarely migrated after occupying suitable grassland. Even if a strong enemy came knocking on their door, they would choose to fight to the death. Otherwise, the number of people who died of diseases and cold in Lusong would be more than those who died in battle. To the Frost Mirror tribe, reputation was like an umbrella. If a powerful warrior appeared in a tribe, even a tribe more powerful than them would have to be polite to him. They had just entered the Shenwu dynasty's territory. If they were scared away by a few thousand soldiers in an ambush, they would never have a good life in the future. However, before they could release their arrows, another round of arrows shot out. This time, the Frost Mirror cavalrymen were prepared. They pulled on their reins and began to dodge the arrows. However, even if there was a gap in the formation of tens of thousands of people, there was only so much space. In the blink of an eye, many cavalrymen crashed into each other and were thrown off their horses. The number of Frost Mirror cavalrymen who died from being trampled by their horses was even more than the number of people killed by the third round of arrows. At this point, no matter how scared the Frost Mirror riders were, they had no choice but to be ruthless. After all, the enemy was still firing arrows at them. If they continued to waste time here, they would just be wasting their lives. They might as well take out the enemy in one go. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.